This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people had so much to gain and had such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in. We'll never let the true facts come aboard to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader?
Don't remember his name.
You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
now these people are in very high positions, Jack.
Yes.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 43. I'm your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khaled.
And today, we're gonna circle back into the interdimensional sphere of ufology.
Yeah.
And catch up on some things, maybe from the last one we did mostly about Tom DeLonge and the To the Stars Academy, because I guess this came to your attention. I actually hadn't noticed this movie coming out.
This is the other side of the pincer blue beam dialectical psyop that's been inflicted upon us over the last couple of months, and probably beyond in both directions into the past and future.
Yes. Whereas, the last episode, we talked about The Phenomenon, that documentary that came out last year, and how that really
on Tucker and shit,
and was made with, I think, the very close involvement with Tom DeLonge and Chris Mellon and Luis Elizondo and the entire To the Stars milieu of people, right?
Yeah. Right, yeah, you wouldn't know. I mean, you hear a lot these days if you're plugged into the UFO world about disclosure, but you might not necessarily know that there are, there be people who are, pissed about the phenomenon, they're not, down with To the Stars Academy.
Any good conspiracy subculture, there are beefs.
Yeah, I guess maybe you would necessarily know if you thought about it for a second. You would realize that there are people, I mean, including us, who think it's a limited hangout.
Yes.
So,
exactly,
if you listen to this podcast, then you would know. But my theory is that this is also a limited hangout and another side of the psyop to create more levels of
Uh-huh.
confusion and disorientation for purposes that I couldn't necessarily say. But
yes,
I definitely
would totally
think
agree.
that. Yeah, I definitely think that there's, something afoot, with this, that not, it cannot be taken at face value at all, obviously,
No.
but, for,
Definitely
I think
not.
also, it's similar to the phenomenon where you have, sort of a central figure who I think is being kind of, led by the hand, but interestingly, in a sort of different direction, and, we're talking about Stephen Greer, who's done some documentaries before that have done, that had pretty broad circulation. I've definitely seen them on a lot of streaming services. He recently came
I've
with
been
another
aware
one.
of him for years.
Yeah.
He's been kind of a prominent ufologist, for years, since the 90s.
Yeah, and I've been seeing talk about him kind of heating up again, I guess, in the sort of heat of this new thing he came out with, which is called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And I guess a close encounter of the fifth kind is when you have meaningful communication with aliens. You don't just see them, but ET beings meaningfully communicate with you. And he's a big guru, in many senses of the word, of sort of how to experience these type of things. this type of contact. Yeah, and basically he situates himself against the To the Stars people and some of the security state people. He'll often talk about the the intelligence state or the security state. As he's sort of framing himself as someone who sees these ETs as benevolent beings who are here to uplift us. Whereas, in this New York Times kind of To the Stars limited hangout, they're being portrayed as a threat. It's actually funny because, he talks about something that a lot of UFO people will say. In fact, I think that it's kind of a similar sort of, it's kind of a permutation of what Coops and Nika said about how they're, conditioning us to see aliens as bad guys for all these movies. He did
say that, didn't he?
He said that, he said that a million times. Coops and Nika's thing was that these are actually like the, forebears or like the kin of black people, and like then black people will be used to fight against their own people by like, white people here on Earth. I think that, what's his name, Stephen Greer was taking it just in a more general direction of like the aliens are good and we are being programmed to fight them. But, but interestingly enough, like, they would constantly talk about Close Encounters of the Third Kind as like a positive example of like, what
a docudrama really are like. He called it.
Yeah, exactly. He called it was a docudrama. Yeah, exactly.
And
so
of course, like, I noticed it featured, and they point out that it featured in a cameo Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who we've mentioned in a couple episodes, and who was the one who coined the categorization system of Close Encounters, and I guess came up with the first three. And then later on, somebody came up with Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind, which was like an abduction, like a UFO abduction. And the fifth one was like humans proactively seeking contact with ETs, which is what Stephen Greer is all about.
Oh, yeah. Stephen Greer's take on abductions, by the way, is that they're all like my labs, like that they're all fake.
Yeah.
And that like the government is doing it to make people think ETs are bad. He had an amazing story. Who was like the ambassador? Like, it was like a story about how like disclosure almost happened, but then like some high level ambassador, I forget for what.
Yeah, it was maybe the UN General Secretary was whisked away by like uniformed men who took him to some aliens who told him that they were
if you disclose like we will abduct HW or whatever.
Yeah, we will abduct George H.W. Bush, all the world leaders.
So afraid, exactly. And like I feel
that
like
was a very intriguing positioning of HW into this whole narrative, and he got off. I mean, despite Stephen Greer's talk of the cabal throughout, he doesn't seem to fully include George H.W. Bush as a particularly sinister individual. And part of that story was that he and Gorbachev were working on some kind of UFO disclosure plan to, basically kind of peacefully end the Cold War and announce that there are aliens, etc. And that's when the aliens or their agents kidnapped the General Secretary of the UN. And I guess in the Bush White House, the
cabal in alien disguise abducted him and were like, we're going to abduct you harder. Or like, we're going to abduct everyone.
All world leaders will be abducted.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Word. But, I think that it's funny.
But the thing about that Stephen Greer says is that was a psyop.
Well,
that was not actually
like,
the real aliens. Yeah.
No,
it was not
exactly.
the real aliens doing it.
Yeah, it was like the deep state cabal that actually abducted him. Yeah, for sure. And I was gonna say that that rang a bell to me when I heard it, because I do think that's sort of like a version of another story, which was that like the UN General Secretary witnessed like an alien abduction in progress, the famous like Manhattan UFO abduction that like occurred over a big city, like and it's weird that like somehow that transformed into him being abducted in the process. There were some weird stories that he told. One of the best ones was, I mean, again, like he was like crying over it, but it's like kind of funny, like because it's so absurd. Like he says, like someone just came up to him and was like, who like is in the government or whatever, like one of these secret high level people who he has contact with, and he was like, Mr. Greer, you know, what really shocks all of us here at the secret, you know, top secret level clearance that you have access to because you're so special, why haven't you killed yourself? Because, like, everybody else who, like, you know, is as advanced as you, like, kills themselves. Which, like, definitely never happened. Like, sorry, like, that did not happen.
Every
like,
one of his anecdotes that he shares about having a conversation with, like, a 2-star, 3-star general, I can guarantee never happened, was like, you know, it's like, if there are aliens out there, Dr. Greer, then, like, why haven't they attacked us? And he's like, you know what? I looked that general in the eye and I told him, you better believe that if they wanted to attack, they'd be wiping the floor with you right now, buddy. And he he was taken aback and he didn't have anything to say. And, like, I humiliated him in front of everybody. It's
exactly.
Like, okay, dude, like, I don't think this happened.
Game over, game, set, match. Like, no, you know,
He drops some knowledge on them and they're all stunned. They're just, their minds are blown.
Right, yeah, they all, you know, it was very similar to, he had a LaRouche vibe, honestly, not only, like, kind of in his appearance a little bit, but also, like, in his, like, sort of egocentricity in terms of, like, you know, everything that has happened is, like, because of me somehow, indirectly, like, you know, he was saying that, like, the recent sort of disclosures that have happened with, you know, of documents pertaining to UFOs from different agencies, the CIA and the FBI, that all has to do with, like, his documentaries and, like, his talks and stuff. Like, you know, it's always a response in some way to him. It is interesting that there was, like, a recent big disclosure, like, right kind of on the heels of this, but I don't know if anything meaningful was disclosed. I was kind of wading through them, but there was a lot of dross, like, in the latest sort of leaks on the Black Vault on some CD-ROM, but
I downloaded it. I started to look through it, and it just I didn't. It would have taken hours, and I think it's PDF searchable hypothetically.
It's PDF
right?
searchable. Yeah. What the most interesting things about it to me were, like, that there was some material in there that didn't seem to mention UFOs at all, and so I was just wondering, like, there was one that was, like, a lot of what it is like, transcriptions from, especially, like, you know, other countries, like, even England, but especially from, like, the Soviet Union, and, like, transcriptions of radio programs, of TV programs, and newspapers, and there was one that was just, like, about the, you know, like, the transition basically to, like, a capitalist market, like, instead of, like, a central planned economy. But, like, in the article, they continually use the word phenomenon, like, at least the translation did, like, from Russian, like, and I think that it's maybe got included just because it said, like, the phenomenon over and over, because I could not see any connection to UFOs, but it is interesting, like, you know, if it weren't just, like, some kind of word search type thing where they included anything saying phenomenon, like, you know, I could not find a reference to flying saucers or unidentified flying objects in there. Maybe I missed it, but I think that was what it was. I read it pretty thoroughly. I did see one, you know, a lot of it is of this nature, just to, like, give a taste. I did see one kind of interesting thing, which is kind of like a report on Moscow and the sort of, you know, political environment in Moscow, like, at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union. And, you know, there are some reports about this. It says, you know, the satisfaction of Muscovites with the election results of the people's deputies was substantially lower than in the spring of 1989. Around 45% of those questioned stated that they were rather satisfied in almost the same number, some 40%, so that they were rather dissatisfied with the voting results. What was the reason for this? In our view, there were several of them. In the first place, the overall dissatisfaction with the organization of the election campaign, and this dissatisfaction to one degree or another, was expressed by a predominant majority of our respondents and was also partially transferred to the voting results. Secondly, the polarizing of the political forces naturally led to a polarizing of evaluations, with some candidates being victors and others not. Thirdly, while in 1989 the very opportunity of a real choice caused satisfaction, now this was not enough. Demands also increased on both the candidates and the election system. Finally, and fourthly, there was also a general strengthening of critical attitudes in society. For this reason, the assessment of the voting results seemed natural to us and not so low. He goes on to talk about some other trends in the mass consciousness. One other trend in the mass consciousness at present, well, maybe I should read a little bit before that. He says, the contradiction between the expectations of the public and their realization intensify the critical mood. People no longer want to accept many fewer shortcomings in comparison with those they tolerated previously. A manifestation of this is, for example, the loss of trust in a majority of the official and unofficial political institutions. One other trend is in the mass consciousness at present is its growing mysticalness, and the appearance of this we are encountering everywhere. This involves both the belief in miracles, flying saucers, the growing influence of various prophets, including psychotherapists, and much else. Ooh. Finally, and most importantly, one observes a democratizing of social conscience, and this slowly is accepting democratic principles and definite change in the attitude toward a pluralism of opinions, a multi-party system, the rights of the majority, and opposition and informal structures. At the same time, for now, this process is just beginning. The transition from old totalitarian thinking will be rather complex and painful. In mass conscience, we are still clearly recording views of rigid control and regulation of social life, intolerance of other opinions, and leveling attitudes. So, this is funny because I think that this resonates with kind of the whole idea of like consciousness raising and the relevance of flying saucers in general. You can see the connection between that, between the idea of, oh, the consciousness raising will create a more just and, like, in this case, like a democratic capitalist society. It's very funny how they spin
and
it.
And their country collapsed in chaos.
Yeah, like, well, it's funny. It's funny how they spin it by saying, like, oh, you know, well, the reason why they're dissatisfied with the results of the election is because, like, they're becoming, like, more sophisticated democratic people who now don't tolerate, like, abusive things. So, like, even though they approved more technically of what was before, that was because, like, their minds have become advanced and, like, they didn't have the sophistication to complain. But now they do, and so actually them complaining about the new system means that the new system is better, which is very funny. But like,
they blow past the idea that people like maybe like didn't like some of the reforms that were going on. Like, probably, I think a significant chunk of the country and a super majority didn't want to get rid of the socialist system overall. But of course, you know, in a CIA report, you're gonna see it a little bit the way you want to see it.
He definitely did. It was, even more, even by CIA report standards, it was pretty egregious. But it's interesting because you can, like,
sorry, go ahead.
There's a connection, you can see the connection between the idea of this sort of, like, mysticalness or, like, this consciousness raising in sort of a new agey way with the idea of consciousness raising to be, like, competent to participate in a democratic capitalist society, you know? Like he's saying, like,
and how
people
one
are more
would naturally flow to the other.
Yeah, exactly. Like, people are more interested in flying saucers now, like, you know, and that's because, like, they're becoming, you know, more sophisticated democratically or whatever. They're gaining the ability to be critical of the government as they hadn't had this ability before or something like that, you know?
That whole passage, honestly, also, I kept hearing parallels to the modern U.S. In a lot of ways with, like, how maybe UFO belief and disclosure is, like, instrumentalized in our country, and how I don't know, like, how and all the claims that Stephen Greer makes throughout the documentary that this consciousness raising and reaching out to ETs will just sort of necessarily improve our society and make people more enlightened, whereas, like, if you look at the Soviet example, it unleashed this kind of Pandora's box of, like, chaos and, like, ontological breakdown of, like, commonly shared meaning that eventually, like, tore the country apart. And in conjunction with other sinister forces. And if you think about America today, it feels like it's tumbling in, like, a similar direction of ontological crises on, like, multiple fronts. And now like, you do see more mystical ideas in a variety of ways, whether it's, like, what we talk about on this podcast, or, like, QAnon, or you know, or reignited interest in UFOs coming in, you know, at the last minute to save us from ourselves. You are seeing a lot of hallmarks of, like, of maybe a similar style of, like, ontological chaos that I don't think you can take for granted is going to, like, just elevate us and make us better.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. It's very interesting how, okay, well, for one, there's many, like, levels to this to take apart. For one, is just, like, the expectation that, like, these ETs are out there and, like, they're just waiting to make contact and, like, they're somehow being prevented by, like, who? You know, like if it's
Yeah.
true in fact that like you know they could easily just like wipe the floor with us and like you know by shutting like interfering with the missiles, like you know one of his key points was one of Stephen Greer's key points in terms of like drawing a contrast between his vision and that of Tom DeLonge Into the Stars is that he interprets the turning off of the missiles that the UFOs allegedly do as being like a peaceful gesture where they're saying like we'll stop you from destroying yourselves, destroy this beautiful planet, you know, in his terms. Whereas Tom DeLonge and them, you know, it's always like with these sort of sinister tones or this sort of like minor key music where it's like they can deactivate all of our weapons in a second.
Yeah,
you know, like
yeah, it's terrifying.
like,
oh my god, we're powerless.
And I do
and
think
it does
those
it
two
does a
things
weird
are,
thing
like,
too
you know,
with like it kind of like erases like a lot of the human conflict. I don't know, Cold War. I think Tom DeLonge, well, maybe both of these guys both have a kind of like 20th century geopolitics like either didn't really matter, it was all a show, or you know actually it was just a smokescreen for like what people are doing around ET stuff.
Yeah,
right.
But I feel like between these two things, like between the whole thing of like hope and fear, you know, two very classical, like traditional sort of, you know, to go into the religious component, to very like, which obviously is very, very present in all of this stuff. You know, we'll talk more maybe about the sort of transcendental meditation. That's a huge component of like his methodology of contact. But, you know, the balance of hope and fear is like, you know, it's kind of like when scientists will like make something really hot and then make something really cold in order to like open up the pores so that they can like insert some kind of thing, you know. That's what I feel like is going on between like these two things of like hope and fear vis-a-vis like the aliens. But my larger point, you know, that I was getting towards in that long statement about the missiles is that, you know, if that's true that they have such power, like, and his theory is that these ETs like just want to talk to us, like, well, why don't they like come and talk to us? Like the whole idea that like we have to do it, like I don't get, like I don't understand that, like why is the onus on us to like do like his method or whatever, or download his app? I think was like something that he was saying. Like
you can. I looked it up. You get $10 on the App Store.
$10, damn.
Yeah.
All right. I'll slip it a little, but like, you know, like, like why do you have to do that? And like, it's just so bizarre that like and like what you're saying in terms of like the sort of epistemological or ontological crisis that occurs like as a result of these things, you know, like they relish the idea of saying like, you know, we're not the main characters, you know, we have to accept like that these old ways of doing things, you know, like our old beliefs like aren't, you know, like they need to go or whatever. And it's like, okay, like, you know, I'm not like all about like anthropocentrism, like up to a certain point, you know, I do love those dolphins and stuff.
Sure.
But you know, like it's just bizarre to say like we're not the main characters. Like we need to step aside for like someone that's just not there. Like where are they? Like they're like this complete cipher that like just like sort of exists like vaguely, and we're being asked to like, you know, radically transform our beliefs for the idea that this is like there when there's actually nothing tangible and it's just being managed in this weird way. Like, you know, what is actually going on here? Like, and it almost has gotten to a point where like, and the way they come out like so aggressively with it, and the increasing production value of this stuff, and the like, you know, and the patina of authority over it, and the way that like people who, for instance, Tucker, people who like, you know, people just take so seriously at face value, like, you know, and even like, you know, people who used to be like big figures on the left of like William Frase, like Glenn Greenwald, you know, for Tucker to come out there and like, you know, say like, oh, Tom DeLonge is right about everything, you know, like, yeah, this UFO thing is a big deal. It really could get to the point in terms of the blue beam stuff, you know, this is just like kind of spitballing, not to sound too crazy, but like, it really could get to the point where like they could be saying something about the aliens, what the aliens want, without there being any more actual concrete like communication from the aliens than there is now. And like just the level of certainty that they're out there could just increase without like the actual availability of communication from the aliens changing at all, you know?
And
like,
you know what is that not incredibly similar to the way that people follow QAnon?
Yeah,
like in terms of like Q is the interlocutor interesting between what Trump is allegedly doing in private and then his followers and the public at large. But like there's always these intimations that there's those things are in sync. Like what Q is saying is what Trump is doing, but obviously it's like it's phantasmic in a way. Like it's a loser. You know, there's never any evidence there that in fact, you know, because he had like, you know, he gave like the, you know, some kind of Q sign or something like that, like, or, you know, he winked, or, you know, was standing next to the, you know what I mean? Like there's all kinds of like little clues like reading into like what Trump is doing, but in fact, like Trump may not saying there aren't people in Trump's orbit that are kind of like orchestrating Q as a psyop, but like, you know, if people are able, if you look at how people react to the Q stuff, like the followers of it, like they are convinced they are in contact with Trump, basically.
Yeah.
And like the heroes around him, when in fact like they're kind of not. So it's interesting to think about how you could develop like a parasocial relationship between like supposed alien entities without ever actually having to like produce them to like say for their own thing. I mean, that's kind of been in UFO culture for a while. Like all those, remember that old blog about white hats and black hats, and it's like they were kind of doing proto Q stuff, like the the thing that happened this weekend, like the Ebola crisis, is actually a smokescreen for like the Zeta Reticulans are fighting the Dracos, and Obama has like, you know, betrayed like you know, the blah blah blah, and there's all these things going on behind the scenes that like aren't actually happening. But if you buy into this narratives, then all of a sudden you feel like you are interacting with something real. And I mean they could produce aliens in a certain way, like they have the technology now to like deep fake like an alien or something, or like probably do a hologram or something along those lines. I mean,
they could.
I will say the one thing is like there are a lot of interesting visual UFOs, it seems, that are shown in this documentary.
I was wondering, like, what are those? Yeah, you know, like, what I mean, like, well, that's the thing. Like, I think it's separate from the whole psyop of it is separate from the actual phenomenon of it that like I have like different opinions about. I think the phenomenon, like, you know, is something that, you know, the documentary gets very much mired in like you know, you bring up QAnon. Like I think we were talking like very briefly before we started recording about how like the terminology that's, you know, he uses is very much like Q terminology. You know, like obviously it's not like a perfect you know, matchup like between like, you know, the left and right, but like, well, you know, like I'm saying like the Tom DeLonge, it's not like a perfect matchup between the left and right, you know, side of the spectrum, but it's almost like this is like, you know, like it's kind of that weird like sort of weird dialectic where everyone just gets pincered into like, you know, the chicken factory or whatever through like these two different like
well, for sure, yeah. I mean,
it's the
Tom
same
DeLonge,
kind of thing, you know. Like,
Tom DeLonge is a little bit analogous, maybe, to like the side that's like openly aligned with the deep state, and then these guys are a little more on the outside. They're not aligned with Trump.
Tom DeLonge is like RussiaGate, and this is like Q.
Exactly,
you know,
exactly. But there's like similar people kind of on both sides, kind of like pushing this stuff along. Like Richard Doty is in this.
It doesn't match up perfectly, but that was so weird. It's like how am I supposed to think that, like, we can trust anything this fool is saying? Like,
exactly.
They did not represent him properly, like, for who he is. They were like,
it's like Mirage Men never happened.
Well, they were talking about how he, like, you know, admitted that he played these tricks on people, whatever, and he was there, like, talking about how I have done these tricks, but, like, you can't trust him about, like, what he says about the tricks that he's done. He was, like, basically there to testify to the idea that they did my labs, like that they did fake abductions, you know. That, you know, he and his agents would abduct people to make them think that they had been abducted by aliens. But like you can't trust anything that he says. Like,
exactly.
At all.
I'm not even
about tricks he's done. Like, you know, whether it's about like, you know, something that he's saying is true or something that he's saying was a lie. Like you can't trust. Like, you know, it's like the. You know, it's like the sort of the liar's paradox or whatever, you know, like,
100%. You can't.
It's the means for us as a civilization to be anchored in something more profound. Because humanism isn't enough, because we're dealing with non-human life forms. Now we have to transcend even humanism into this idea that there has to be something more universal within us. And luckily there is. It's this field of consciousness that is cosmic and universal. Doesn't matter if it's a homeless person on the street or an MIT professor. If they are conscious and awake, the entirety of the cosmos is folded within them like a conscious quantum hologram. People say, where do I have to go? Well, first you have to go within yourself.
You know, another thing I noticed about in this movie is, okay, so not only do they have UFO videos from these, like, CE5, just to say real quick, like, what is his, like, solution is basically to, for, you know, making close encounters or achieving close encounters of the fifth kind, is to go with, like, a group of people out in the desert in, like, Joshua Tree or Arizona or whatever, and kind of, like, camp out and then meditate. And then, like, wait for it and, like, ask for ETs and, like, UFOs to show up. And then, according to the footage from this, I mean, we could always say, like, you know, is this, like, CGI? But I'll give him that, like, there is a phenomenon in the sky in these videos that kind of looks like it's something. It's, like, literally a UFO. You don't know what it is. And there's also these, like, energetic light beings, but they don't have videos of those. They only have still photography. And that's a whole nother thing as well. But he keeps talking about how, like, making proactive contact with the ETs is so important. But what I kept waiting for in the documentary, and I don't feel like much of it was given at all, was, like, the substance of that contact besides, like, meditating and asking them to show up, and then they show up. I guess he did say that one of them healed a guy was kind of partially deaf. And, you know, he had some encounter with this spirit being who was, he called him a master healer. I don't know where he got that from. Who had, like, a weird triangle head, this kind of specter.
His hearing or something, right? Like,
you know, there's stuff like that. But in terms of, like, the substantive message, like, a contact implies some kind of communication, I thought, from, like, the way he was hyping it, that, like, we need to, like, sit down and have, like, astral conversations with these beings or something. But he didn't really get into, like, well, what are they telling you? Because I thought that was a very interesting, especially if you're suspicious of all this, like, what are they telling you to do? You know? They didn't really get into that at all.
Well, also, like, just put the beings, like, show me the being. Like, show me the being. You know, like, it's
couldn't
like,
they do it for the documentary? Couldn't they, like, go out there with them, like, again and, like, reproduce this? It sounds like he does it all the time. So, like, all they had was, like, cell phone footage kind of, like, from, I mean, maybe they sent, like, a camera out there and set it up, but they didn't have a real, like, okay, the filmmakers are, like, on the ground with these people and, like, we're meditating now, and, like, okay, there we go. I mean, maybe having somebody not meditating, like, ruins it. I don't know. But, you know, it's like, I would have liked to see a little more meat on the bone here if we're going to talk about how spirit light beings are showing up, and, you know. Didn't really get into that.
Yeah, they didn't, and also, like, you know, I'm, like, they're, like, I mean, I am partial to, like, the sort of, for all his susness, I am partial to, like, the Jacques Vallée, like, sort of, take, or the John Keel sort of take on some of this phenomena. Like, I'm sure that there is, like, some reality to some of this stuff, although, in terms of what's being shown in the documentary, like, you really can't say, like, you know, for one, like, something that those researchers, who, in a lot of ways, are now embedded with these people, like, you know, so I feel like these people should be aware of something that they always said was that there was something, like, tricky or sinister or manipulative about this phenomenon. That, like, there was something inherently, like, you know, or maybe not inherently, but there's definitely an aspect, a prominent aspect of it that had to do with deception. Like John Keel's Operation Trojan Horse, or, you know, what we read from Passports of Magonia in our earlier episode on this general topic. You know, there's always that aspect of deception. And, like, beyond that aspect of the phenomenon itself, like, I'm 100% certain that, like, some of what we saw could be created with visual effects. So, like, if we're, you know, like, at the point where, like, you know, we're just gonna accept that, like, I mean, and better than that could be created with visual effects. So that does definitely raise, like, the blue beam problem, you know, like, people need, like, a real situation. I mean, I guess, like, part of the real, like, thesis of blue beam as formulated by that guy, Sergei Monast, was that like there's gonna be like projections into like our own minds like telepathically. So that's like part of the blue beam that like we'll hear voices in our heads, you know, that is going to be more than just an optical illusion.
Which is another thing, you know, that like there are technologies that exist in some form to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe it can't do it to everybody at the same time around the world, but you know, targeted audio devices that can beam. They even put it up on a billboard for a TV show in New York years ago. I remember that, where you'd basically, it was like some horror show, so it would like spook you out. You would walk, if you crossed a certain line, a place in the sidewalk. Hear, like,
whispers in your head,
but it was not audible to anybody around it. So, I mean, that type of technology is not...
And there was also something that like only teenagers could hear, like so they could secretly text like in class or something. That was a while ago.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure there's like some frequency that like people of a certain age like couldn't hear, but you know, teens could, or you know.
I mean, we remember Michael Aquino is writing about some of that stuff in Mind War as a just kind of postulating that, you know, these could be the real weapons of the future. So if we're getting to this technological precipice where we could almost manufacture a spectacle of that magnitude, I don't know if I trust this guy's breezy confidence with which he thinks we should just go hang out with these ETs and they're like totally benevolent. I think the title card at the end even says like 0 people have ever been harmed by like making contact with an ET.
Well, yeah, but that's based on the idea that like every single alien abduction is false and was actually like not ETs. So like, and that the real ETs are like, you know, just the light beings that you get by using his app. And that like really it's the cabal that has harmed all these people, like traumatized them.
Pretty much.
Like, you know, like, kind of arbitrary. Definitely not a settled matter.
He's taking a little bit of like a Grover Fur approach of like, it didn't happen. Though I think, you know, this guy doesn't provide the receipts like our boy Grover does.
Of course.
And so it's just, I don't know. It's just kind of like it's a very declarative statement to make. Like nobody's ever been hurt by an alien. Like what? You don't know that. Like what if they were ancient astronauts and they came here and, you know, enslaved a bunch of people to build pyramids as energy vectors or something? You have no idea. Like what if there's different aliens? How does he know there's only one faction of aliens? Like how does he know any of this stuff? What's going on here?
Yeah, exactly. Like exactly. We need like again. It's very similar to the Stars Academy where it's like, there's this phenomenon, you know, like, is it a threat? Like, you know, probably. Like, do we know anything about it? Like, where does it come from? Like, it's like, not really. Like, but look at all these videos. Like, whereas he is actually claiming to have had, like, real contact and, like, to have people be healed. Like, did they not tell him anything about what's their home world? Like, where do they come from? Like, what is, you know, they just told him about the nature of consciousness or whatever. That, like, you know, like, a bunch of, like, generic quantum theory that like Ibn al-Arabi like figured out like a millennia ago, you know, like
well, like, he is very into quantum theory and things like that, and though he doesn't seem to be claiming
into chakras and you know, the prana,
Kundalini awakenings.
He all about that, you know, like howdy Modi, you know, very, like
well, you know, I don't know, and that gets back also to like where he started out, which like he doesn't like. He talks a lot about how he used to be, you know, into like kind of Eastern stuff and meditation and things like that, but he really started out as a trained transcendental meditation teacher and then became director of I think maybe his own meditation organization, and also became like a doctor, a traumatologist. I think it just means like an ER doctor, but still, it had a certain ring to it. Thinking about
it does
abduction
have
and
a certain
shit.
ring to it.
Yeah, and so you know and he mentions throughout the documentary. There's a few quotes that pop up, and like one of them is from like the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder.
He's all about it. Yes, for sure.
Yeah,
right.
And then the Parahamsa Yogananda, the founder of the Self-Realization Fellowship, both get some quotes in there. But he drops like a little bit of like, you know, pro-TM like propaganda all the time, but he doesn't say it as such. But you kind of see it in the documentary. He talks about how, you know, there was a study done where they took, you know, they took 1% of the residents from a town and they trained them in like meditation techniques, and then they sent them back to the town, and then the crime rate went down. Like people started getting, there were less visits to the emergency room when just 1% of the population was meditating, you know, unbeknownst to everybody else. And I noticed like the kind of, you know, the graphics while he's talking about this are like zooming in on some academic article that was like, when people like learn the transcendental meditation trademark like form of blah blah blah. I was like, oh, this is like that thing where transcendental meditation like went into some city. I feel like David Lynch has talked about that before. That's like a big talking point of like TM ideology, is like it literally solves all the problems. It ameliorates all the problems of society if people were just doing TM every day. And that makes me wonder, like, kind of like, oh, okay, then like why, I don't know. I assume certain types of this, you know, meditation are popular in India. And you know, I mean, it still has, you know,
like the Maharishi stuff is like neo-Hinduism, you know, like it's very much the same thing. It's like, it's of a kind. You could draw a comparison between like Hindutva and like that stuff, like Hindutva, you know, like the like Hindu, like the revival of Hinduism, like not something that's like really historic. Like Hinduism is kind of an academic construct. It's also like a New Age spirituality construct. For sure, and it's also like a nationalist, like, you know, construct, like in terms of like, so, and I think that there's like definitely links, like, you know, he, like, you'd make it out being like, you know, of course, I did notice, like, when he was talking about how, like, oh, you know, all religions, like, will have to go. Of course, like, the first thing they show is, like, Muslims praying.
I saw that. I knew that you were going to get triggered when I saw that last night.
I did get triggered because, like, you know, it's always, well, because Muslims are always, like, they're, like, always, that's what has to go. You know, that has to go.
Yeah.
We need to embrace the prana, you know, we need to embrace, like, this, you know, like, he's like, you know, people have called the consciousness all things. They've called it God. They've called it Dharma, you know, like, but he wouldn't say, like, you know, they've called it Allah. Like, he wouldn't say that. Like, he would just, you know, of course not, because that has to go. You know, that's the epitome of like what is barbaric, and that these ETs like are gonna take away from us, and they're gonna take us to like, you know, Hindu fascism. You know, like shut the fuck up. You know,
well,
like,
I mean, he is kind of he acts like he's above the whole religion thing, but
like,
he really is kind of like
it's the same. I have no ideology thing, but no, like you do. You have a transcendental meditation TM, like TM ideology, like, which is just like buy my app, like and meditate like in this way that was like cooked up in some like MK psyop lab or whatever. You know,
did you also notice just to, you know,
Jin, and he can tell you about how Islam stays, you know, like
they're definitely talking to Jins. But
they definitely are.
But I mean, just to keep it balanced in the biased editing, I was also likewise triggered when he talked about like, you know, the cabal, and like that's what happens when fascism, and then it cuts to like a photo, like a video of Joseph Stalin, and then,
I did notice
and then
that
cuts to like Mao, and it's like it was like only communists, like when he goes like that's what fascism is all about, you know. Like, it's like, oh, sweet. Awesome.
Right, I don't even think that there was like a picture of Hitler or anything. It was just like Stalin,
I don't think
right
so.
away. Yeah, it was the same thing.
Kind of like there was a recent Lincoln Project ad that was very much like that too. It was like when fascist dictators, it showed like Castro and like Stalin, and then like cut to Nazi death camps. Like very cool. All right, so
no, it was weird,
you know,
because like, you know, he would say like you know, if all people together like meditate, or if they pray or whatever, it's like, well, you know, then how come like the places where people pray more like don't have like less, like, you know, or whatever, like you know, that's not really like how he cited some weird study about how like you know, after like the Pope's funeral, Princess Diana's death, and then after like 9/11, there were these huge like surges in like they like measured like they had some random number generator, and then like the numbers started to. He was talking about being coherent, and we had to become coherent, and like it's like, but what about like events that were like tragic in like the non-Western world? Like what about the death of like Princess Diana? Like, okay, is it just because people are watching TV and like they care more about Princess Diana than like the death of like another like public figure?
That's probably
like,
true.
9/11, at least a bunch of people died at once, so that's something.
But no, I think he was talking about the attention being paid to it or something. I think
guess.
He was more along
but he
the
was
lines.
Even saying that it was before 9/11. I think that like the numbers were off the chart.
He didn't seem to be he didn't seem to be too interested in how like this number generator thing like predicted 9/11. Like it started going off before the attacks commenced.
Yeah. And did
like,
that happen like, at like comparable like situations like of mass death? Like
well, it seemed like 9/11 was the biggest one, but that's probably because I don't know. I assume because it had the biggest psychological impact, and maybe there's a grain in there that's kind of interested, like the mass psychological like shockwave of 9/11. We talked about it before. How it caused almost like a mass PTSD. And there's never been a spectacle of like destruction that that observed that vastly observed by probably billions of people like simultaneously. So I'm open to a little spookiness, but then I don't know. Then he just goes into this whole thing about quantum physics and coherence, and ends up comparing us to like helium molecules, right? That's one of his analogies.
Yeah,
and
that's
like, why he thinks.
Yeah, like obviously, like they're, and I guess it was like a singular event where like a bunch of people died at once, and obviously, we talked about like the spectacular like nature of 9/11 and like the effect that it had, and like the global consciousness like really was transformed in 9/11 as a result of the United States like greater. I mean, it's interesting because like it's weird that like our the random number generators and like I don't know where they were positioned, like were they positioned all around the world or what?
They were, yeah. They were all around the world.
I mean, I had to look into that study, which I honestly haven't done, but like it's weird that the rest of the world like kind of reflects, like people were predicting events in New York City, like in Bahrain, like like what? Like it's weird. Like I guess like they reflects like the greater global presence of like events in the United States, like.
And media,
obviously,
the ubiquity of television, and
exactly,
et cetera, and radio.
Maybe it was such a big mass ritual that like a bunch of like Luciferians were channeling like all their ceremonial magic, and that's why the random number generators changed.
Right?
So, like,
he does say it's all about willpower, right? Even a plant in a randomized experiment could influence like a randomly moving light.
If you send your intent into water, the crystallizations like will change. Yeah, he was all about like siddhis and psionics. I've been hearing a lot about that stuff like lately. I feel like he's definitely having a moment, like the idea of like siddhis for sure. But
interesting.
Yeah, it was definitely like a very particular like paradigm of like that type of thing. Even though like there's a pretense of like that not being the case, like I would.
Well, I'm just now. You know what? I noticed a quote by Demi Lovato, who does not appear in this documentary, but got some press last fall because she was hanging out, going to Joshua Tree with Stephen Greer in his CE5 groups, and she posted some UFO videos, purported UFO videos, in October, and she wrote, like, the past few days I've spent in Joshua Tree with a small group of loved ones and Dr. Stephen Greer and his CE5 team. Over the past couple months, I've dug deep into the science of consciousness and experienced not only peace and serenity like I've never known, but I've also witnessed the most incredibly profound sightings both in the sky as well as feet away from me. This planet is on a very negative path towards destruction, but we can change that together. If we were to get 1% of the population to meditate and make contact, we could force our governments to acknowledge the truth about extraterrestrial life among us and change our destructive habits destroying our planet. This is just some of the evidence from under the stars in the desert sky that can no longer be ignored and must be shared immediately. a bunch of emojis, like a comet and a flying star and a heart. To make contact yourself, you can download the CE5 app, and it will teach you the protocols to connect to life form beyond our planet. P.S. If it doesn't happen on the first try, keep trying. It took me several sessions to tap into a deep enough level of meditation to make contact. Happy communicating. So, what jumped out at me there, among many things, was the claim that Stephen Greer repeats like over and over again everywhere he goes, which is if we were to get 1% of the population to meditate and make contact, we could, force the governments to like acknowledge the truth and like disclose it. And, if you read basically like the central claims of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi that he made in like the 60s and 70s, he was saying that basically, like I said, he would constantly cite that study that if you had 1% of people meditating in a certain area, that would have a positive effect. And this was actually called the Maharishi effect by TM followers. And he actually introduced the TM Siddhi program in 1976, so just like you were saying, and he proposed that the square root of 1% of the population practicing the TM Siddhi program together at the same time and in the same place would increase, quote, life-supporting trends, and this is called the extended Maharishi effect. And there's really not any good evidence, like academic or scientific or whatever, anything peer-reviewed, that basically that can verify that. I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but they've had 50 years to like, these are very kind of specific claims, So like that 1% thing ends up like that's exactly what Stephen Greer is talking about, just in a slightly different context about basically, So I mean, it made me wonder like. Is he doing a little bit of like an insight role as like a TM person, like going into the UFO world?
Well, I would almost say my thought would be that like within the inner circles of like the Maharishi, I wouldn't be because like Siddhis ultimately like in many ways like are certain like abilities like levitation, like things like that. There are certain abilities that people. Like, I think Stephen Greer even mentions, like, it's amazing spycraft or whatever. Like, that's why these intelligent people are so interested. It's amazing, so I think that there's always been an idea that, like, certain abilities, special abilities could be conferred by this. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if there's, like, within sort of the people who are really into it, there's always been an idea that at least maybe if not ETs as such, like some kind of entities could be communicated with, like through it, like whether they were called by a different name, I would like think, but I mean, I'm not 100% sure, like if that's the case, but I wouldn't be surprised, like if
neither am I,
what they would say, like publicly, like that, like like where like Mia Farrow or whatever, or David Lynch, like that, like when it was really being explained or whatever. They would say something about like maybe interactions with like entities, like
it wouldn't surprise me at all, because I don't recall David Lynch, like, even though those types of things appear in his certainly the appearance of like sinister cosmic entities definitely appears in a lot of his work, but I don't feel like when he's gone around giving interviews about TM that he talks about talking to UFOs or anything like that. Like I think he tries to put like a much more grounded, broad, appealing spin on the whole TM thing. Like it's an excellent tool for creativity, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you just do it for 30 minutes a day, like it's very almost like in a self-helpy thing. But right. Stephen Greer does talk about how like certain, gurus and people like that, could do things such as like levitate. They could achieve bilocation. They could astrally project. They could dematerialize. They become as small as an atom, and et cetera, et cetera.
Stephen Greer was talking. I mean, those are like traditional things like bilocation. He was talking about someone being able to be in two places at once. Mm-hmm. These are like traditional like ideas of these sort of divine bequests or capabilities that people can get from that type of stuff. And I think that like being able to communicate with certain entities has always really been a part of that. Like, if you think, I mean, everything that he said is like abilities that like a Sufi saint would claim to have, you know, or that would be attributed to someone like that. And one of those abilities often is the ability to communicate with jinn as well.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised if, like, you know, that's not a focus, like, you know, as maybe some of these other abilities are, but that's definitely one of them. Like, and that's definitely like an idea. So I would not be surprised if like that was something that had been there from maybe even the beginning. But certainly, like, yeah, this is more or less like one of the most recurring images in the documentary is all those people like holding hands, like, you know, like a bird's eye view, those people holding hands like in a transcendental meditation circle or something. And yeah, like definitely like that is really like kind of the UFOs are like the you know, the cart before the horse of the transcendental meditation, like in a lot of ways, I think. Like
yeah, this, like you're doing it to search out, you know, these entities. Yeah, exactly. It feels kind of like cosmically reckless in some way.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really do believe in this, like, how?
Well, I mean, like, listen
to
Crowley. You know, Crowley would advise caution. You know, people are excited about whatever they get, but they're not even sure. Like, once it's been contacted, it's very difficult to confirm like what the nature of it is. You know, and he would always say, well, you know, you need to do these sort of ceremonies or whatever to make sure, like, but yeah, it does definitely seem reckless, and I would not, like, the idea that he's definitely not, I don't know how he's come to the certainty that he's not being deceived by these beings in the same way that he might be being deceived by, like, the government or whatever, that other people have been deceived by the government. Like, or that the people in the government who he's spoken to, like, aren't deceiving him, which I'm sure is often the case. You know, but, like, it's weird that he has this weird, like, arbitrary kind of, determination of, you know, what's real and what's not.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's a very, he has this almost, like, political allegiance to whoever these beings are, which I guess he, when he was young and he was getting into transcendental meditation, he was up in the Blue Ridge
yeah, he
Mountains.
almost died. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And, like, I know that there's no death, you know.
Oh, yeah, that's what he said. That's what another thing he said to, like, one of these punk generals was like, yeah, like, aren't you afraid we're going to kill you? He's like, yeah, well, guess what? I already died when I was 18, so death doesn't scare me at all. And the guys were like, damn, what a badass.
He kept saying, like, I know that there's no death, you know.
Yeah,
like,
death isn't real, so you can't scare me with that.
Yeah. Word. Well, what did he see? That's what I want to know. What did he explain? Like, did he experience, like, I forget, like, if he explained a documentary, did he see ETs? Like, what is his idea of the afterlife? That's what I want to know. Like, you know.
I don't know. I don't believe he really talked about it.
Do you become an ET? Like, yeah, that would be nice to know. Like, that would be a nice thing to include in the documentary.
It might be something,
you know?
like that. Like, I know, actually, I think he did say at one point that basically these light beings, I think it was him saying this, that the light being is sort of like, oh, that's sort of what we become when we die. I think I might be getting him mixed up with another kind of a new agey guru person, but I mean, he believes that, I guess, like, he's a big believer in, like, thought as, like, a, I don't know, like a medium of communication and, like, a force in its own right. You know, like an interdimensional, something that can, you know, basically, you know, be interdimensional and things like that. And I don't know, but, you know, he seems to believe in some kind of a spiritual afterlife, and, you know, thus is not afraid of death, and these guys are all, but there's no real, like, sinister aliens. He doesn't really, the most specific he gets about it, I guess, is his constant claim that at various times, you know, the aliens could have just, like, blown us all up or enslaved us or something. He does mention a lot that at least the United States, like, shot down a lot of UFOs. And, you know, he credits, like, that's the ultimate proof that they're not hostile.
Yeah, like, they've killed all these. Yeah, like, what you've been doing, like, you know, is so reckless and awful. You know, like, if they wanted to kill you, like, you know, if they were hostile, yeah, you know, obviously, game, set, match, where they would blow you off the planet, etc., etc. Yes.
Easy.
I'm really curious about what, like, he thinks happens to you when you die. Like, or, like, you know, do you, do you become an ET? Like, that's what I want to know. Like, he has a near-death
Well,
experience, you know.
Like you said also, it's unlike, I don't think To the Stars Academy, though they flirt with this, but they don't go as hard on it. But Stephen Greer kind of co-signs the Jacques Vallée interdimensional hypothesis of ETs. He believes they do come from a different planetary system, but that they've mastered interdimensional travel, and that's why they can come here. He doesn't believe that, there's any kind of
sort of middle ground UFO thing where, like, they bend space or whatever so that they can travel, like, faster than light or whatever.
And that's why they can phase in and phase out of being perceived, basically. Is because they're slipping back into like a different dimension. So, which again sounds a lot like Jinn. So I mean,
sure, for sure, a lot of it, a lot of this phenomena I would ascribe to Jinn. Apparently, I guess in an earlier documentary, he made a big thing out of like this sort of like premature human fetus that he found.
He did,
and said that it was an alien. So like,
I kind of remember that being a happening briefly some years back.
I don't remember that being there was because he made another documentary called Sirius, I guess, which was about maybe where they come from.
It was about Sirius.
I remember 2 documentaries he did. One was that, and the other one was called Unacknowledged, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The Stan Romanek story or whatever. And in Sirius, there was a lot of stuff about this fetus that I guess turned out, or at least, according to the Cabal, is actually, like, just a human fetus, and not an ET at all. But, that's just what they tell you. Like, obviously, he wouldn't concede that, but I do remember it.
Yeah, I assume that like a lot of these UFO lore people, they've dumped a lot of lore, over the years into, various explanations of like who these people are, but they always seem to kind of like, de-emphasize, certain things kind of like fall out of favor and then just stop getting talked about. So it's like he wasn't summarizing probably everything he had ever said in this movie. It was just what he's putting out now as like, this is where it's at today. But then we're still left kind of wondering, and I guess what's different about it now is that he's able to work in news footage of CBS and MSNBC and Tucker Carlson and all these people actually writing articles and talking about UFOs, and Steven Tyler and Joe Rogan looking very creepy. You got to see this movie, Unacknowledged.
Yeah, he looked like absolute shit. Yeah, it was. He looked awful. Yeah. He looked like hell.
And also some of these big hitters, very sus lord kind of people, but not insignificant people like Dr. Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, who also have affiliations with To the Stars Academy. But they were 2 of the big scientists at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, in the early 70s, and I believe they ran Project Stargate, the remote viewing and psychotronic phenomena experiments at Stanford from the 70s through the 90s. And I know Russell Targ is in this one quite a bit, and he still asserts that remote viewing is real, and they were able to weaponize it. They even they flashed an article that did kind of interest me about a group of maybe people that worked at SRI that started using their psychic powers to bet on the stock market. There was some article, I wasn't able to kind of find the thing, but it happened, I think, in the 80s, where some of these like SRI guys started betting on, they cornered the silver market by using psychic premonition. And I think I mentioned in the past, like my psychology teacher in high school was kind of into some of this stuff. And I believe he told us an anecdote about how there had been like researchers some years back that tried to use their remote viewing and psychic prognostication skills to make a killing in the stock market. But then like everything went bad for them. Like some of them like got sick, they got in fights over it. I mean, they might have broken some laws too. It's not clear. But basically it's almost like they were cosmically punished for using the remote viewing skills to make profit on the stock market.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what that was all,
sense.
that was. But I wonder if that was the story he was referencing, the one they put in this documentary. If this group of guys like claimed to do this, and then because I think the headline they briefly flashed said like group faces chaos and dissension after cornering the silver market with psychic abilities or something like that.
Right,
So
yes.
it was kind of there was a fall from grace involved at some point.
Yeah, was it in this that they showed the image of like an ET that they had like remote viewed, like with like a triangle head or whatever? Word. Yeah, I guess that he believes that they like did seed the earth, so they're not light beings. They are physical beings, even though like they have like they can become light.
I don't know. He
like
seemed
a
to say they
lie.
were light beings.
Sounds like
but
a Jin lie
yeah.
to me. They're just jealous because we're made of earth and they're made of fire and they can't seed our race. Sounds like a blue beam psyop to me.
CE5, Albuquerque, New Mexico.
We meet in Alexandria, Virginia.
We are here doing a CE5 training in Arbor Vidal, Wisconsin.
And we're doing CE5 in Beit Shemesh, Israel.
Here in beautiful Buckingham, Virginia.
I'm practicing CE5 in Cambridgeshire, United Kingdom.
We are making CE5 contact in Cape Town, South Africa.
My name is Bill Clark, doing CE5 in Chesterfield, Derbyshire in England.
CE5 east of Colorado Springs.
Yeah! Preston, British Columbia, Canada, and making history.
We're making history. Join us. CE5,
I'm doing CE5 in Essen, Germany.
Making CE5 in Freistadt in Austria.
And we are doing CE5 in Geraldton, Western Australia.
We are doing CE5 in Mexico.
And making history. Please join us.
We're doing a CE5 in Hong Kong and making history.
Roger.
Yeah, film me.
We do CE5 in Florida, North Carolina, United States of America.
I'm doing CE5 in Knoxville, Tennessee, USA.
And we CE5 here on the shores of Lake Huron near Lexington, Michigan.
We have a group doing CE5 in Melbourne, Australia.
I'm doing CE5 near Moorhead, Kentucky.
We are doing CE5 on Vancouver Island in Canada.
CE5 in Ontario, Canada.
From Orlando, Florida.
We are practicing the CE5 protocols here in Iceland.
We are doing CE5 in Riverdale, Georgia.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? Yeah. So, just to, I was just able to find this article, which is kind of interesting, from 1984, the Wall Street Journal. It's called "Did Psychic Powers Give Firm a Killing in the Silver Market?" And it's about Delphi Associates, which is a struggling three-man partnership formed to cash in on the fruits of its founder's psychic research. This is not just an amusing exercise, says Anthony R. White, a Stanford University MBA art investor and manager of a family fortune. The research heavyweight is Russell Targ, a physicist who built sophisticated lasers for GTE Sylvania Inc. until 1972, then spent the next 10 years doing hush-hush, still classified psychic research for the federal government at SRI, the sober California think tank. At SRI, Targ concentrated on remote viewing, the ability of one viewer to see what another person, the beacon, is looking at, even though the beacon may be thousands of miles away. By 1982, Mr. Targ says, "We'd shown unequivocally that people could describe distant locations as well as events that lie in the future." One of Delphi's first commercial ventures was its foray into the silver futures market. Delphi tried to forecast roughly how much silver prices would change between Thursday's closing and Monday's closing prices. In all of the first 9 tries, Keith Harary, the most psychic partner, made correct predictions. The investors made in the middle of 6 figures, and Delphi got a commission. Alas, the power proved fickle. Our major client suffered an attack of hubris and started pressing us for more predictions, says Mr. White. Delphi failed on the next 2 tries.
Oh, no.
It was a difficult blow for all of us, Mr. White says. The existence of psychic functioning shows that there is something fundamentally incorrect about the prevailing view of how space and time are understood, Mr. Targ says. Damn. So I guess maybe it just stopped working after a while. But yeah, I guess that literally was Russell Targ that my teacher was talking about, like doing this back in the 80s. Interesting.
Yeah,
but I guess
wow.
maybe I thought they were going to say our major client suffered a heart attack and died after doing this. But I guess just pressured them into predicting too much and
Oh man, I mean, this is kind of not directly related to what we're talking about, but I did hear like another amazing remote viewing story, which was about this guy who I guess Edward Reardon, who I guess remote viewed QAnon.
Really?
Like, you know, he remote viewed Q. Yeah, and that's not even the like. So I'll just like, this is from some other podcast, I guess, called the Seeker Podcast. This is the description they give of his remote viewing session. Riordan was tasked to view QAnon in July 2018. Q, who claims to be a government insider, has leaked information alluding to the takedown of the cabal and power within the U.S. government and around the world. In reviewing this target, Riordan stressed to take his data with a grain of salt because it is an unverifiable target. Okay, so there's your caveat. Remote viewing data should not be used as the be-all, end-all, but as a piece of data in a larger exploration or investigation into a particular target. What's interesting is that after completing the session, Riordan started encountering anomalies that lend credibility that at least some of his data collected may be accurate. Riordan explained that he observed an organization experiencing a disagreement over something. He also viewed a group of people who were working on something they felt was incredibly important for the future. These people, Riordan describes, were living as if they were already in the future. Riordan observed the development of what seemed to be a nanotech gel and an advanced AI.
No.
He perceived satellites controlled and programmed by this AI, and at what he referred to as the event horizon, a single event changed all of humanity. He perceived an energy wave coming out of the satellites and impacting people's minds, changing them. Riordan explains that this AI was able to scan someone's body, find whatever problems were plaguing their minds, and solve them. It was a way to solve all problems. Riordan then states, however, that as wonderful as this may sound, such a technology terrifies him.
Wow.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so anyway, I guess Q was a evil AI, or a good AI, I don't know, but some kind of, yeah, I had heard that I had heard that in like a relative to like a Stephen Greer like conversation about ETs and like you know how people have certain intuitions or whatever, and someone mentioned that one of their intuitions was that QAnon they said I actually had sense that QAnon was an AI being before it was confirmed by the remote viewer, you know, and I was like, oh, okay, so let me look at this a little more. But yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
So
anyway,
is QAnon just a machine learning AI?
I guess
unleashed
so.
on the Chan boards?
I guess, or a satellite from the future projected back in time to solve everyone's problems. Which I would not think would be the case, but
some Q followers might in the next year. I could see that taking off a little bit. You know, like Rocco, like Q's basilisk, basically.
Q's basilisk, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Like he is like the John Connor in the future that has won the war against the cabal, but he has to.
Yeah, it could be like an inversion of Rocco's basilisk, where like you know. Those who don't help Rocco's basilisk can be tortured by it. Like it's kind of like you know the cabal
very similar to Q.
Tortured. Yeah, like, true.
Yeah, all
like
of you
they're all going to be
laugh
executed by military tribunal. Yeah, exactly.
Hung by the neck until they're dead.
Yes, hung by the neck until they are dead. In accordance with U.S. Code, like 3.78, you know.
USMC 45
the penalty
AB
for treason.
97.
The penalty for treason stands affirmed on like you know July 17th, 1976, or whatever, like 1776.
Do we want to talk a little bit about Daniel Sheehan, one of the prominent figures that pops up in Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind? Yeah.
Yeah, he was probably like the second most heavily featured person next to Stephen Greer himself. He's like all over the documentary, and he was one of the people who like specifically took shots to the Stars Academy as like, you know, a limited hangout or whatever, or part of the PSYOP to make us think ETs are bad. Or something. And yeah, he's a very sus individual. Yeah. He
to say the least.
Yeah. Definitely to say the least. Yeah, one of the things that we were kind of talking about was like how something that undermines like the idea that like these ETs are like cultivating greater enlightenment in people is like the fact that like none of them are like really incredibly enlightened, like are are living like lives of like true enlightenment. Like one of the things that was funny about the documentary to me that I didn't mention before was that at the very beginning he says like. If you're, I guess it's some recording that he made. I don't even know. Probably made it for the movie. But Stephen Greer is like, if you're seeing this, it's because I am dead, or I have been entrapped, or like, I have disappeared. And it was very funny that he included like, I have been entrapped, because like, I think we know like what I have been entrapped means. Like,
maybe he could ask his friend, the guy who was running MUFON. Until a couple of years ago, who got arrested for soliciting a 13-year-old.
Yeah,
is he really in the movie? Okay, that's him.
Yeah, he was in the movie.
What was his name? Jan something.
Yeah. What was his name? It was MUFON guy soliciting child. Yes, head of mutual. Yeah, Jan Harzan.
That was
if you
in
look at a picture of
2014.
him, I think you'll recognize him from the movie. Yeah. Wow. I guess. Yeah, this article is from July 14th, 2020, but I guess maybe it did happen in 2014. I don't know. But, or maybe he did it in 2014. Yeah, it's funny. This article, the first thing that comes up is, of course, from Vice, which is always, like, the first to have the beat on, like, all of this, like, stuff, all this drama here.
Definitely.
Yeah, and they're just talking about all the fucking UFO people who have, like, made, like, all-caps Facebook posts about, like, white genocide and stuff like that. Like, Ken Pfeiffer, head of MUFON Rhode Island, posted racist memes and comments on Facebook during the height of the Black Lives Matter protests. Holy shit, I would have picked their cotton for them if I thought it would end this BLM racist madness, in all caps. So I guess he's not ascended, but I don't know if he's been doing transcendental meditation. He just might be into UFOs in general, but...
wow, yeah, so very enlightened.
Harzan is a former IBM engineer who, when he was a kid, was visited by a real UFO with no visible means of propulsion, and it's profoundly changed his life, but the ETs didn't tell him not to commit multiple felonies for targeting minor females online.
Wow.
Word.
Okay, yeah. So, so the interesting thing about Daniel Sheehan is that he's not solely a character from like the ufology world. I mean, he's firmly in it now, but he had kind of an entire very colorful career leading up to like kind of his embrace in the 1990s of UFO stuff. And he was like a popular like public interest lawyer and a constitutional lawyer and kind of political activist in the 60s and 70s, and was involved in a number of relatively big cases, like including the Pentagon Papers, which, you know, has its susness, and a number of lawsuits related to Iran-Contra. And I think in the 1980s, he founded the Christic Institute with a Jesuit priest. What was his name? I forget. William J. Davis, the Reverend William J. Davis, who was a Jesuit priest, who had worked together on the Silkwood case, which I actually never saw the movie, the award-winning movie that came in, but that was about, I believe it was about like health and safety, like a scandal around health and safety at a nuclear-powered plant where Karen Silkwood, I think, was murdered. I want to say, under suspicious circumstances, and then Mike Nichols directed like an Academy Award nominated movie where Meryl Streep played her, and the kind of the whole legal case around it and bringing it to light and like suing the Kerr-McGee company was done by Daniel Sheehan and William Davis, and I guess they represented victims of the nuclear disaster at 3 Mile Island. They prosecuted KKK and American Nazi Party members for killing Communist Workers' Party demonstrators in the 1979 Greensboro massacre, as well as police and federal agents whom they said had known about potential violence and had not adequately protected the victims, and defended Catholic workers providing sanctuary to Salvadoran refugees, I think in the early 1980s. So they had like this like left wing bent to them for sure. The vibes like really give me a lot of vibes of like the sort of people that orbit around Julian Assange and Snowden. There's a kind of Greenwald-y vibe to this guy. I mean, especially because he's a lawyer. He's always popping up pro bono. And I guess in the 1980s, there's some. The thing with the Christic Institute is like
it's kind of the opposite of Greenwald, because he started out being like a left-wing lawyer, and then he kind of floated into being like a sort of weird, like kind of QAnon-y commentator / still lawyer sort of. Whereas Greenwald started out as like defending like racists, then became left-wing.
Oh yeah,
was like
that's true. Actually,
else.
No, you're right. You're right. There was more of actually an ideological shift going on than with Greenwald, who's always been defending Nazis.
Yeah,
since the very beginning. But
true.
And I think even the fact that Daniel Sheehan helped, did work. I don't know if he was like the main lawyer, but he worked on the Pentagon Papers case. Of course, Daniel Ellsberg has his own kind of like air of susness around him. I think working for the Rand Corporation. I think he did work for he was in Vietnam in the early 60s. I don't know. There's something. So that was almost the original kind of limited hangout, like public interest, big showdown thing. I think the official narrative around the Pentagon Papers is specious to say the least. But, Daniel Sheehan was like this very colorful guy who got himself involved in a lot of things, and even is still like involved today. In like the Dakota Pipeline, he was a big person with that. He worked with Russell Means, I think, in the American Indian movement in I think the 80s and 90s. He's done he focuses a lot of stuff on like the the assassination of JFK, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess the Christic Institute was it had its nonprofit charter revoked in 1982 around an Iran-Contra related lawsuit that had a judge revoke their nonprofit status. So I guess something blew up in his face. But I just wanted to say, because it's worth noting, that in the 80s the Christic Institute was financed by something called the New World Foundation. It was based in New York. So it already sounds great, right? Like they're probably doing God's work. It was founded, let's see who founded this. All right. It was founded in 1954 by Anita McCormick Blaine, a prominent member of the McCormick family and an heiress to industrialist Cyrus Hall McCormick and a supporter of Henry Wallace's 1948 presidential campaign. Its initial funding of about $20 million was noted for progress towards education, ethics, peace, and public health. And I guess during the early 1960s, the New World Foundation's goal was to aid education and promote better intergroup and international relations. During the early 1970s, the foundation supported various civil rights and community projects. Hillary Clinton, whom Marion Wright Edelman had mentored, was on the board from 1982 to 1988 and was its chair for some of that time, including 1987. During that time, the foundation gave money to a variety of organizations active in civil rights and other New Left causes, including the Christic Institute, Grassroots International, Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, FAIR, and the National Lawyers Guild. By the early 1990s, the foundation was giving money to a Silicon Valley group fighting consequences of computer industry toxins, all the while undergoing criticism for being invested in the likes of Louisiana Pacific, Nike, and Philip Morris. Cool. So
awesome.
Weird that Hillary Clinton pops up in this, and that she was in a way involved in the patronage of Daniel Sheehan's Christic Institute that was investigating Iran-Contra, that according to some people her husband was like up to his, and she was up to her neck in. Wouldn't
Hillary
that be
Clinton definitely was prominently, like in this documentary at least, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, it was like like they did kind of despite being very steeped in Q type terminology, they did kind of include Trump in some of the montages of like evil politicians, but they really lingered on Hillary. And they definitely showed, they had some later parts where they're like, the president, he can't do anything, and they just had shots of like Trump with like his family or whatever, like Meliana like holding hands, like
I think it felt a little calculated. They didn't have a lot to say about but as we know from earlier, because we found it in the Podesta emails, that Hillary Clinton is no stranger to UFO shit, and her campaign manager John Podesta is no stranger to it. Bill Clinton's defense secretary William Cohen is no stranger. Bill Clinton isn't. So you go down the list and like all these Democrats that are really into UFO stuff. It's just an interesting kind of interlock there that Hillary Clinton was on the board of this foundation, deciding to both on an Iran-Contra level and on a later on, they would be going to, they'd both be maybe a little interested in the disclosure question.
Yeah, well, Hillary did say, like, I'm going to get to the bottom of it, right? Like, she
did.
made some kind of statement,
that's why they had to make her lose, because...
Exactly, my God. That was the real steal, that was the real fraud, that's what the media did.
But I think Daniel Sheehan now, this is a guy, he's like a triple Harvard alum, Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law School, Harvard Divinity School. So this guy, and he, of course, as you might guess, is of an Irish Catholic persuasion, and founded this institute with a Jesuit priest, which, for certain people might set off a few alarms a little bit. What's this guy, doing running around with all these Jesuits? We've yet to really dive deep into the Jesuits, but, in certain sectors of, the conspiracy world, they loom quite large and are really probably up there with maybe even beyond the Knights of Malta as basically the most sinister subsect of the Catholic Church. The Catholic octopus,
they're known. Yeah.
And I think what's ironic though, because I think this guy is kind of an interesting example of how there were some Jesuits in the 70s and the 80s that were, for example, like much more open to, and sometimes even openly advocating for like liberation theology, which was a synthesis of Catholic doctrine and Marxism-Leninism and basically Marxism.
I mean, Jesuits are known for being like, they definitely have an association with secrecy, or maybe even like some kind of infiltration or espionage is associated with the Jesuits. And I think that, definitely like if you go back to I think that a lot of it has to do also with the fact that the early ranks of the Jesuits were made up more so than perhaps other religious orders of like conversos and things like that, and there was obviously suspicion around like whether people had actually given up their previous religious beliefs, especially like their Jewish beliefs. So I think that like is part of the reason for some of these Jesuit, part of the association for the Jesuits with sort of deception. Although, of course, I'm sure the Jesuits have been party to, like, various deceptions or things that perhaps on behalf of the Catholic Church at various points. But, they're also known for being left-wing, as religious orders go. And that's, I think, for the people who go for the Jesuit conspiracy theories, a lot of the time that, is more proof, rather than less.
And I think it might be the kind of the modern source of is like the sort of the political polarities like within the Catholic Church in the 20th century, how the Jesuits kind of inevitably ended up usually, at least in public facing roles, they seem to end up on the left side or the reformist side or the progressive side of every issue, and we're always an enemy of traditionalism, and we're also playing footsie with like socialist and left-wing and even communist forces in the world that, of course, were in most cases officially secular, atheistic, and those ideas were, legitimately provocative. And of course, with like the Vatican II councils in the 1960s, modernizing all of these things in the church around the world, there was kind of this climate of worry among the more like traditionalist, segments of the church that, perhaps the Jesuits were kind of like up to something. Now, of course, we know that the super right-wing traditionalists were also up to something, like running around with Licio Gelli and, laundering like mafia money through the, Vatican Bank and like probably helping like Gladio operatives like blow, I don't know, maybe not that, but you know what I mean? Like doing, subversive operations, and, in some cases supporting like right-wing death squad, governments in Central and South America and Africa, et cetera, et cetera. So, I'm almost, I think there's a part of me that's willing to, look at like so it's like a weird inversion where the Jesuits are, they're kind of like actually like the cool Catholic. I mean, they're like the based Catholics because like they develop, some of them develop this, this like revolutionary synthesis of religion and like materialist based politics that basically got stomped out by the 80s by John Paul II. He really hated it. It was like it was way too communist for him, but still like I have to resist the urge to a perfect example of that is Pope Francis, who I believe is the first Jesuit pope. He is simultaneously accused of being a secret liberation theologist his entire career and is now like implementing liberation theology as the Pope.
Right.
And at the same time,
he's making us worship Pachamama, or whatever.
The degenerate nativity scenes, just all that stuff. But at the same time, he's also accused from a variety of places of collaborating with, the Argentinian like military junta, like turning over left-wing priests and activists and things like that in the 70s. So it's like, what part of this is like an insight role, and then what part of this is like what he actually believes, and that kind of sums up the murkiness of the Jesuits. Is like you are kind of never sure what they're. I've heard other traditionalist Catholics say that the common belief is that a lot of them were like literally KGB assets. Like they were, and then like basically liberation theology was cooked up by political theorists in Moscow, and then disseminated amongst their KGB asset Jesuit priests in like the third world to blah blah blah. I mean, if so, I'd have to like tip my hat to like Moscow. Like that's like a pretty ambitious plan, but I feel like it is more organic than that, and it was more, at least in a lot of cases, was very genuine. It seems more genuine than, shepherding pedophiles and, like, laundering, like, mafia money for 40 years while you rail about how communism is, like, destroying the church. You know what I mean?
You can see that even in, like, the Christic Institute, how they reorganized, like, after, there was some controversy around the Christic Institute that led to its collapse, maybe we should get into, but, after that, Sheehan reformed it as the Romero Institute, kind of making it even more explicit, sort of Jesuit, liberation theology reference.
Totally.
So,
the martyr. He wasn't one himself, but basically the symbolic martyr of like, liberation theology adjacent Catholicism.
Yeah, well, he was canonized by Francis, I guess. So yeah,
he was,
same. Like, definitely, for sure. That same association admired for sure by Jesuits, or the people of that sort of vaguely Jesuitic tendency of liberation theology. But I'm reading an article right now on publiceye.org, which is interesting, related to kind of the collapse of the Christic Institute. And, it goes into how, their Iran-Contras sort of litigation got stalled up, and they encountered a lot of problems. Among the, among the sort of leadership, such as there was like concern that like there's a conspiracy against them, which I'm sure to some extent there was. But this is what the article says. It is arguable that while Christic pursued the broad conspiracy of the secret team, referring to
L. Fletcher Prouty's book. Yeah.
The bedrock portions of the case are involving the actual La Pensa incidents took a back seat. A few weeks before the case was slated for the trial, the Christic Institute still had not diagrammed the elements of proof, a legal procedure where the text of the complaint is broken down into a list of single elements that had to be proven with either valid documentation, a sworn affidavit, or a live witness. This created problems for researchers and lawyers who had no master list of what needed to be proven when devising questions for depositions and witnesses. When a special meeting was convened shortly before trial, it turned out that some of the allegations concerning the alleged broad secret team conspiracy, the only evidence in possession of the Christic Institute, was newspaper clippings and excerpts from books, and in a few incidents there was no evidence other than uncorroborated assertions collected by researchers. Raised at the meeting was the issue of whether or not the case had unwittingly incorporated unsubstantiated conspiracy theories from right-wing groups such as the Larouchians. The staff was warned that some defendants would likely prevail at trial due to lack of court-quality evidence and would then likely pursue financial penalties. So people got pissed because Daniel Sheehan started poisoning all of his cases with Larouchi crap.
Wow.
And everyone was going to get off the hook because they were not presenting court-quality evidence and just a bunch of allegations with no actual evidence at all, except for LaRouche's newsletter.
Oh my god!
So this led to a lot of issues. Someone Reynolds, I guess Dr. Diana Reynolds, another critic of portions of the Christic thesis. Reynolds, an assistant professor of politics at Bradford College in Massachusetts, thinks undocumented conspiracy theories hurt the Christic case. She believes there is much solid evidence concerning the actual La Pensa bombing and aftermath and some specific Iran-Contra material, but she thinks it is fair to say that some right-wing conspiracy theories were woven into the theory behind the Christic case. Reynolds read thousands of pages of depositions taken by the Christic Institute while she was researching a story on federal emergency planning, later published in Covert Action Information Bulletin. According to Reynolds, it is clear to me from the depositions of Ed Wilson and Gene Wheaton that the notion of a broad conspiracy conducted by the so-called Enterprise, the Enterprise, beyond the La Pensa bombing and the specific Iran-Contra scandal has many holes. I am thoroughly convinced that those two depositions contain the nub of the unsubstantiated conspiracy theory, and I have said this for a very long time. When we get into the Christic allegations regarding the Middle East and Asia and the Camp David Accords and 40 years of conspiracy, their thesis falls apart. Reynolds suggests it is fair to ask whether or not Christic was manipulated by right-wing persons associated with factions in the intelligence community. It is curious that Wilson is a former intelligence operative and that Wheaton, at the same time he was working for Christic, was also alleged by Mr. Owen in his Christic deposition to be passing information to Neil Livingston at the National Security Council to protect some of the people who were implicated in the Iran-Contra scandal, says Reynolds. At least two former Christic investigators said they warned Sheehan not to rely on conspiratorial analysis and to be suspicious of material from right-wing sources. Nevertheless, Sheehan was rebuked by his own staff and others in Christic leadership for repeatedly lapsing into an overly conspiratorial analysis in public appearances and for making claims that the Christic staff could not document or otherwise support when responding to follow-up inquiries by reporters. So they hotly deny, that they wove right-wing conspiracy theories into their case, but they did have extensive LaRouche contacts that they don't dispute.
That is a huge thing, and I guess that opens up the door into all kinds of interesting interactions that Sheehan was having in the 70s going into the 80s, and we found a particularly interesting blog article from MikeMcLowry.wordpress.com that is a real banger of a takedown of Daniel Sheehan.
It is.
That literally might touch upon almost every topic we've done in every episode, the entire dramatis personae of all of the Contra episodes and what we just did with LaRouche and all these other things, with a lot of good Jesuit paranoia mixed in.
Yes, definitely.
So basically, it's basically I think, yeah. So he founded it in 19. It starts here in 19. There's like a lot. We can't get to all of it, but I think we'll just talk about in 1976. The author writes, I should probably now bring up what else was getting off the ground here in 1976. LaRouche requesting to work with the Catholic-dominated, per Miles Copeland, CIA. Dennis King wrote in his biography that we mentioned in Chapter 5 of LaRouche, the Redding trio did indeed operate a scam. However, the LaRouchians had a history of extensive dealings with the intelligence community dating back over a decade, entirely apart from this. The NCLC, LaRouche's group, first offered its services to the CIA in 1976. By the way, this is when George H.W. Bush was director. Just throwing it out there. A longtime CIA contract agent Mitch Warbell, who we mentioned in the last episode, subsequently became LaRouche's security advisor, and meetings with several retired high-level CIA officials took place. I bring that into the mix here because Lyndon LaRouche would arrange very similarly styled conspiracy factitions as Sheehan and Davis would soon embark upon. They all contained one key element. They misdirected attention off who was really controlling whatever it was they were, quote, exposing. Something Sheehan would do throughout his career, from what I've been able to ascertain. The CIA official mentioned in the above reference was Mitch Warbell, and that happened in 1977. You're going to see me start bringing in Scientology elements into this now because that's where Sheehan is going to show up next. Just before Guardian Office and Delphi School staff, Paolo Leone put out his book, in 1977, Mitch Warbell, a CIA non-official contractor asset, starts an extended and little-notice relationship with LaRouche as his personal security advisor, and exactly the same year as Leone put out his book, 1978, Warbell brought in, who else? John Singlaub. And I guess... let's see. Mitch Warbell. This is from another old post from Peter Dale Scott, I believe. Mitch Warbell would himself be indicted on drug smuggling charges in 1976, 2 years before he began an extended and little-notice relationship with John Singlaub and Lyndon LaRouche. It is hard to explain Singlaub's dealings in the same period, 1978 to 82, with his former Kunming OSS colleague Mitch Warbell, and more importantly, with Warbell's employer since 1977, Lyndon LaRouche. Then, July 8th, 1977 rolls around, and the Church of Scientology gets raided by the FBI. Within a matter of weeks, Jesuit Daniel Sheehan appears on the scene defending Scientology. And they found in the WikiLeaks Church of Scientology FBI files, there was a letter sent from the Church of Scientology to Congress basically complaining of persecution by the federal government. And it mentions in here, Daniel Sheehan, Jesuit chairman of the Civil Rights Task Force of the Washington Interreligious Staff Council, points out that the FBI raid is one more stage of an escalated confrontation which is developing between the American church community and investigative agencies of the federal executive department. Now, why do you imagine would we see Sheehan, a Catholic, defending the Church of Scientology? Look at the last paragraph from page 2 of the Scientology's letter. Quote, recently a church-sponsored commission turned over to Congress a report on Bolivian Interpol agents trafficking cocaine. Names were included. The Justice Department, it was hoped, would investigate and find the various connections within the U.S. Their answer was to raid our church. Exposures done thus far of illegal activities by Justice and other agencies has only shown the tip of the iceberg. The Church of Scientology, it's from a newspaper article 3 weeks prior to the raid, wrote that the Church of Scientology claims that last Friday's raids by the FBI in church offices in Washington and LA was in retaliation for evidence gathered on Interpol and given to the United States Justice Department 3 weeks ago. Scientologists claim they have found documents and other proof on how Interpol is connected with cocaine and heroin smuggling, along with French intelligence. Church officials say they have documents giving names, dates, places, and transactions. They say they have documents that show how high government officials were aware of Interpol dealing but refused to do anything about it. What the GO guys were stepping on was this is the author, the blog author again. What the GO guys were stepping on was the Vatican's involvement in the drug trafficking in Bolivia. So they have a Jesuit attorney show up like some white knight of old. This Catholic Church representative was not defending the Guardian office. They were protecting themselves. That is fucking devious as shit. If you look at the part of what Sheehan said again in light of Vatican drug trafficking involvement, you can see it. Quote, escalating confrontation which is developing between the American church community and investigative agencies of the Federal Executive Department. I guess good people in the BNDD, later called the DEA, and other parts of the U.S. government have been increasingly getting onto the fact there was CIA MI6 complicity in drug trafficking. It was part of carrying out Operation Gladio, but that aspect was not known by most well into the 90s, and their investigations were starting to get perilously close to exposing the Vatican bankers' role in sharing the profits in a huge way. That is why you see a Catholic Jesuit like Sheehan saying, doing what he did. It's a message. Kind of like the message that Francis Lemuel sent in regards to the lawsuit Scientology was then running against the DEA to force it to release files. A kind of, we go down, you go down, so knock this shit off message. And I guess, I guess, you know, this is, they post a lot of declassified articles about the Vatican and the CIA, basically forming a branch of Cis Alpine. I think that's a bank specifically just for laundering cocaine money from South America in 1975. And he talks about Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon, who, as we said, you know, set up the cocaine operation in Bolivia and, you know, had an army of mercenaries, the Angels of Death, that, you know, he loaned out. There's a very weird thing where a Larry McDonald, a Georgia congressman who in the 80s became the second president of the John Birch Society, basically read a conspiratorial kind of screed into the congressional record in 1978 that I guess involved... It's a little unclear, like, what the argument being made here is why this right-wing congressman...
there's definitely some unclear aspects of this argument.
Yeah, we don't need to go into all of it, but apparently...
which right-wing congressman are you talking about?
Larry McDonald.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, okay. The fact that Congress were allied and used by Scientology first, and then publicly came out attacking Scientology... makes McDonald even more obvious as a disinformation, do whatever intelligence wants to cause chaos and confusion source. Yeah, and I think he does something similar where it's like kind of unclear reasoning. I mean, you know, like you can't hold the Mike McLeodtree blog to the absolute highest standard, although we do appreciate the thoroughness of this long screed here. He says similar stuff later on, like about the sort of UFO stuff related to some of these things. He says, it goes, you know, pretty... maybe let's get into his things that he's saying about basically UFOs in the Vatican. Because he's kind of, he works that into, I mean, along the way, but, like, I guess, I don't know, John Singlaub, like, was hanging out with LaRouche and founded the fucking Western Goals Foundation and was hanging out with Werble, who was training LaRouche, and there's a bunch of Texas millionaires involved. There's a lot of it, he does kind of talk about it at the end, like, of that article in the Mike McLeodtree blog about, you know, Daniel Sheehan in particular, and, he goes into it, like, at, pretty significant length. It's,
like, the Synanon is involved. Synanon is also involved. Yeah. Like, it's all, it's good grist for another day, but I think... But somehow, also, I noticed that Daniel Sheehan was a big booster of the anonymous protests against Scientology in the late 2000s. And he was also a big booster. I think I remember him as, like, a presence somewhere in Occupy. Like, he was on TV, he was going down there and probably, but, you know, offering free legal representation or something like that, you know?
Yeah. So apparently, a conscious computer spacecraft from the He had childhood close encounter experiences analogous to the one that Jack Sarfati reported in The Parsifal Effect, according to this guy. That's a quote from Jack Sarfati, who says he had these experiences analogous to the one I reported in the Parsifal Effect. So he was contacted by a conscious computer spacecraft from the future, allegedly, according to Jack Sarfati on MyNet Journal. So, given Sheehan's past history of showing up to either tanker control areas of slave master interest that people are looking into, I'd say that his involvement in the UFO community tanks on a decidedly tainted light. It's almost, I guess he meant takes on, it's almost as if you can confirm that the Vatican has something to hide if you see Sheehan show up. So yeah, he's very into the Vatican, conspiracy angle here. He basically, this is about, the Vatican disclosure of the UFOs. I contacted the Jesuit who happens to be the head of the Vatican Library requesting this information, and much to my surprise, I was denied information. I wrote a second letter to then say, look, I guess you must not know who we are. This is Jesuit headquarters in the United States. We have 10 provinces here in the United States, more than any other country in the world, and we're requesting this information to share with the president. They still decline, so I have to report that to Marcia Smith, who was head of the Science Technology Division of the Library of Congress Congressional Research Service, and she asked if I would be willing to become special counsel, to this investigation that was being conducted by the Science and Technology Committee. So I guess this is what Daniel Sheehan is saying, which is just gibberish. But anyway, I agreed to do this, and I told her that I would need to have access to certain kinds of information that I would like to have. She said, what would you like to see? I said, well, the first thing I'd like to see is the classified sections of Project Blue Book, those sections that have been referred to by Mr. Dolan earlier and by Gordon as not really available. Much to our surprise, I was given permission to see them, and they brought them to Washington. Mike McClatchy was not impressed by that. He says, either the so-called classified is a bunch of crapshit disinformation deliberately planted and tagged classified for suckers, or Sheehan is lying and nothing like this ever happened. He's saying, I really hate it when people like this falsely characterize things as amazing and spiritual somehow that are total horseshit. Not only does it work to discredit real magical spiritual happenings, which do exist, but it's just plain evil to try and hide those real experiences, trying to describe that kind of special ability / happening onto somewhere it does not belong. That's what I think Daniel is doing here. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that analysis of him in general. But that's just general... So he's saying that, the Vatican does have something to hide, but it doesn't have to do with these gray aliens. He says that, Sheehan says, that's the issue that's before us right now. Because if in fact we are not in ultimate control, and there is an extraterrestrial intelligence of this type of sophistication that's been visiting our planet, entering our airspace and outmaneuvering our aircraft, it is perfectly clear that from political consciousness that abides inside our executive branch and inside our legislature, that is not something they want to share with the American people because it would ultimately undermine the confidence of the governed in their governors. But the Vatican isn't sharing it either, so according to this guy, that's a problem. A little bit of an anti-Catholic strain here. He's saying he thinks America's about being governed. That's so Catholic of him to spin it that way. Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
So yes, he.
Well, also, did you notice?
He contradicts himself. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that he has a colorful anecdote here about the rivalry between George H.W. Bush and Jimmy Carter. That I guess from his testimony in 2013.
I didn't see this. No.
Yeah, so I guess he said he does say that basically so he spoke at the 2013 Citizens hearing on UFO disclosure and had some choice quotes he says that at one point he contacted the Jesuit, who happens to be the head of the Vatican Library, requesting this information about UFO data, and much to my surprise, I was denied information. I wrote a second letter to then say, look, I guess you must not know who we are. This is the Jesuit headquarters in the United States. We have 10 provinces. Oh, yeah, I think he did that.
Yeah, this is what I just read, yeah.
Sorry. It was that. And yeah, he says he was granted permission to read the Blue Book files. But then here's this anecdote that he said later. Immediately after his election in November 1976, President Carter called into his office then CIA Director George H.W. Bush. President Carter asked to be briefed by the director of the CIA on the issue of UFOs. In that meeting, CIA Director Bush asked the president-elect if the president-elect would leave him in as the CIA director, and that he would in return promise not to run for political office if President-elect Carter would promise to keep him as director of CIA. Bush wanted to become more or less like J. Edgar Hoover had become at the FBI. He would remain, that it would be above politics, and he would remain in that position. President-elect Carter reiterated his quest for the UFO information, saying he had his own person in mind to be director of CIA, which happened to be Teddy Sorensen. Bush at that time then refused to provide the information to President-elect Carter, saying he did not have adequate clearances, that he was not the president yet, and that he should ask his own CIA director for that information. But if he wanted to have the information ahead of time, he could contact the Science and Technology Committee of the House of Representatives, and they could go about getting things declassified to show him. That is what generated the request from the Congressional Research Service to me as general counsel for the Jesuit headquarters in the United States, asking if I could gain access to the Vatican Library to obtain the information that the Vatican has in the library's classified sections to deliver to the president for his review. I contacted the Jesuit, who happened to be head of the Vatican Library, requesting this information, and much to my surprise, I was denied. McClowery says, does that sound in any way logical to you that a congressional committee would ask Sheehan for access to the Vatican Library rather than asking them directly? It doesn't to me at all. You have to figure with Sheehan here that he's showing up for a specific reason on this point. What is it? What is he capitalizing on? You get a hint of what it is in this part. Quote, there are very high-level meetings going on right now with the new Pope to discuss what positions are going to be taken by the International Catholic Church with regard to the theology. My understanding, as former chief counsel for the Jesuits, is that the Catholic Church does not want to be behind the power curve on this issue. They realize that with the increasing contact and discovery of additional planets, it is going to become clear within our lifetimes that highly technologically developed extraterrestrial intelligence actually exists. And he says, yeah, you mean like the advanced technologies they appropriated for themselves as far back as the time of the Nephilim, and then lied about the source they really got it from? I don't know what that's about. I don't know if he means Nephilim. Yeah. Anyways.
They hate, I guess this is actually by Virginia McCloud, which is under the Mike McCloud banner, Virginia's research. But she obviously really hates Catholicism. But yeah, like... she does point out how, I almost think that, her theory is that he is, running interference for the Vatican, but I don't necessarily know if that is, I would say that is true. I would say that, there's something definitely going on with him, but I don't think that it's maybe the Vatican that's managing him. It is interesting that he, as she mentions later on, I guess Consul Magno, who was the astronomer for the Vatican, he said there were no Vatican UFO secrets. Daniel Sheehan obviously was like, no, there are Vatican UFO secrets, which is interesting. And I mean, he's definitely gone out of his way to associate himself with the Jesuits, and with the Vatican. And, we're working together to... figure out this UFO situation, to figure out how this will work or whatever. Yeah.
No, he definitely but is he working as soul? I mean, it almost feels like they're doing like a reverse LaRouche a little bit. Surely this person is a puppet of British intelligence. Of course, yes. Caught again. Your Majesty.
Yes.
Caught again, Father.
Yes. No, he's definitely seen as being in the UFO community. It seems like people see him as being connected to the Catholic Church, which means he's connected to the NWO. But I almost feel like really it's more likely that he is. Being an asset of the same intelligence adjacent things that caused him to sabotage his own Iran-Contra lawsuit.
With Hillary Clinton's blessing and financial support. totally fucked up.
And has just gone down that whole, and, like, insofar as, like, he has some, like, investment in dealing with the Vatican. I don't know. I almost feel like that's just, like, window dressing. Maybe there's something going on there. I don't know. I mean, the Vatican definitely has shown interest in it.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
So maybe there's some kind of, like, limited hangout or, like, control going on there while they'll sort of tease that, there's some kind of secrets, and then you have, like, Sheehan, who's, like, kind of not formally associated, but, like, kind of connected, where he'll come out and, like, tease about all the secrets that they have. There might be some kind of strange, manipulation going on there, potentially, but that would not be the focus of my, like, read on him, although certainly it is the McCloutry analysis.
Just to give a little more flavor about, like, what he's saying, like, over the last few years, I found it very amusing that the McCloutry blog found a post on the Steve Pichenik Talks forum from October 2016. And this is just one person's opinion, but I guess they said this past weekend, I went to a talk at MUFON to hear Daniel Sheehan talk about the ET situation, and have followed his work on human rights for many years, since the Christic Institute, and as a Harvard Law School lawyer, in all caps for some reason. I was perplexed, and still am, about his true agenda. As a Jesuit lawyer for the Vatican in the USA, and his proposals about Pope Francis wanting to take down the banking system of the NWO, true or not, basically is Daniel a wolf in sheep's clothing? I have in the past admired him for his work on the Pentagon Papers litigation, Silkwood case, journalists' rights not to reveal their sources, and his general campaign as a constitutional lawyer. However, I do know Pope Francis's past and his killing of nuns and others. For his own past agenda in Argentina, I have tried to find out on the internet, but I still cannot find out if Daniel is a very clever shill posing as a lion. Please clarify and help. Daniel is a major player now in the UFO circuit, and many people are believing and admiring his talks and agendas, which are connected to the Catholic Church that we know is NWO all the way.
Well, Einstein observed that a particle could be in two places at once. Like that. The same thing. And so he couldn't really explain it, but he just called it spooky. But it's not spooky when you think about it. The whole cosmos is actually non-local because it's conscious. A few years ago, there was a journal, physics journal, that published, and it was actually on the front page of Newsweek. It was back in the late 80s, early 90s, where they did a study. And what they were doing is that they were studying photons and shooting them down an area, and there would be an aperture or a window that it would go through. But what happened is that the physicists found that when they thought of where they were going to move, the photons changed course precognitively. In other words, the photons reacted with the thought and consciousness and intent of the physicists. And this was done over and over again and proven. This was published in mainstream physics journals. But people say, oh, well, that's interesting. Well, I don't know what it means. They chucked it aside. This is in the mainstream physics journals. You look this study up. And then, of course, you have people like Dr. Bob John of Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, the Peer Lab. And back in the 90s, he and I spoke about this. He says, you know, what you're doing out under the stars is sort of in a clinical, experiential way what I'm proving in the lab. And that is that everything is conscious, and everything can react to thought and consciousness.
I mean, that's interesting there, because it mentions that he's running around at MUFON saying that Pope Francis wants to take down the NWO banking system.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's a very Tradcat kind of take. Like, you know, he's gonna create the Empire of Guadalupe and get rid of usury, you know, with Laudato Si or whatever.
It's
but
what do we have from the church itself saying to what extent are they actually into it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I wonder, like, it's a weird sort of pairing between him and Stephen Greer, because I feel like, you know, how would, what about all the oppression of Christians that happens in in India, even though they're embracing their prana and like their advanced, you know, understanding. It almost seems like they're trying to like both like converge on this from like their kind of religious angle, but they're like kind of at odds in a way. I almost feel like from the point of view of like we need to move on from like ourselves being at the center, you know. I guess any religion, like contrary to like the canard that is often out there, any religion could deal with the revelation of extraterrestrial life. Like, it's supposed to be a huge shock to the system, and certainly it would be a major thing, but, like, you know, it's just a matter of, like, who like, you know, maybe there's some kind of idea of, like, a scramble for, like, who gets out ahead of it first, and maybe there's an opening there for, like, a transformation, like, you know, for new religious teachings, or for new, factions within, like, these religious organizations,
for sure,
like, you know, to get control through, like, you know, territorializing this new domain. You know,
no, absolutely.
Yeah, like, but,
I mean, there are a few. There are a couple. I think was it Cardinal Monsignor Corrado Balducci, a longtime friend of Pope John Paul II, the Vatican's leading exorcist. Is one of multiple people from the Vatican who has been very outspoken about extraterrestrials on multiple occasions. He has stated that contact between humans and extraterrestrials has already happened. I guess he said, quote, the existence of these things is real. We can't have doubts. And so, I don't know. I guess some people... We can't have doubts. You can't doubt it. And there was another Jesuit priest, I think, that is quoted here, Father Gabriel Funes from Argentina, just released an article titled, literally, Aliens Are My Brother, detailing various extraterrestrial scenarios as they relate to Christian theology. You can still see him speaking live on this subject still 8 years later in this video where his topic is searching for interstellar spirituality. And I guess in a 2008 New York Times article, the Vatican's chief astronomer says there's no conflict between believing in God and in the possibility of extraterrestrial brothers, perhaps more evolved than humans. In my opinion, this possibility exists, said the Reverend Jose Funes, head of the Vatican Observatory and a scientific advisor to Pope Benedict XVI, referring to life on other planets. Funes, who runs the observatory that is based south of Rome and in Arizona, held out the possibility that the human race might actually be the lost sheep of the universe. There could be other beings, quote, who remained in full friendship with their creator, he said. I mean, that's a big swing in terms of revisionist. That's getting to like cosmonaut Jesus Christ territory.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the idea that there was no fall, I guess, for the aliens. You know, they didn't, like, the Adam and Eve of the aliens didn't, like, mess up in some way. Once again, Christian idea that, like, other religions don't necessarily have, the idea of, like, there being some, you know, of course Jesus had to die for the sin to be purged, or whatever, But, yeah, I mean, that is definitely getting into cosmonaut Jesus Christ territory. I don't...
Maybe really, he learned it from his Soviet handlers. But, yeah, you know, he's a strange character, Daniel Sheehan, overall. And definitely. It's not clear what the Catholic Church is kind of getting. I mean, maybe it is this kind of, but like, you know, do they have some Da Vinci Code secret archive managed by the Jesuits that has all the UFO information in it?
Yeah, I mean, they do have like their own like astronomical laboratory, which is, you know, and also like I feel like some of these people within the Catholic Church, like, you know, there must be people within it who are basically the equivalent of academics, where like, they can like investigate like whatever suits their fancy. So like the theological implications of like a popular topic like possible extraterrestrial life, like obviously like you're gonna comment on that. I mean, I feel like the ulama like would do the same, like and probably has done the same, but like, you know, we have like a standard explanation of just saying everything's jinn, so like that might although it is an interesting conflict between that and sort of the, you know, McClatchy did mention the sort of religious objection that led to the sort of shutdown of the, according to like Harry Reid and some of the people who were involved in ATIP, as we mentioned in our earlier episode on UFOs, the idea that like it was shut down due to like religious objections. Like, he does kind of, or I guess it's all part of Virginia's research. So she does mention that, it is odd how, like, this religious objection would emerge, to the continuation of this program from certain Congress people. She obviously says, like, the Vatican is, like, behind this, but I don't know. I feel it seems more like maybe an evangelical type of thing.
It does seem to be there's a dichotomy here where I feel like the evangelical currents are much more likely to be fearful of aliens and see them as a threat and not anything
it's interesting because I feel like Catholicism, they have like a more established demonology, but I guess maybe it's that just a Puritan legacy in America of just like being hyper vigilant about demons. I guess, but
they also have somewhat in some cases
congressmen who her whole thing is like, they were investigating, they might have found the truth, but then like this whole new religious information, like this is what McCloudtree says. Harold E. Puthoff said that we're sort of in the position of what would happen if you gave Leonardo da Vinci a garage door opener. I think we might have talked about, like, quoted this in our earlier episode. First of all, he tried to figure out what this plastic stuff is. He wouldn't know anything about the electromagnetic signals involved or its function. An interesting characterization, to be sure, and one that reveals that they actually did have some real advanced, as in not slave master controlled, remnants that they were analyzing. So, like, the slave master is, like, that's, like, the Catholic Church / everyone, the cabal.
The cabal,
Clearly
Mr. Global.
Mr. Global, etc. Clearly things were going a little too well in this program, because around 2010, officials at the Pentagon started floating the usual quote-unquote embarrassment possibility as an excuse to stop the program, which means it probably was making significant progress, and they didn't want the public to know, but it was the push to stop it on religious grounds that was really interesting. That had to be Vatican-related, as usual. But I almost feel like that was evangelical and not, like, Vatican-related, so I'm not sure, although it is interesting that, like, there's, this sort of conflict between the religious way that he is sort of framing it, and also the way that Stephen Greer frames it, and this religious objection that emerges, like, among some people. It's obviously hotly contested what the nature of, like, these entities is. Yeah,
exactly.
This is funny.
And the level of trust.
In a 2002 interview with U.S. Catholic Consul Magno, the planetary scientist, again, at the Vatican's observatory, he said, any entity, no matter how many tentacles it has a soul, he said.
What? Yes, that's specific.
Yes. I guess,
any entity, no matter how many tentacles it has? Is he talking about Cthulhu?
Catholics believe that animals have souls? I really don't know.
I don't believe so, but I feel like more people would like lie and say like your dog has a soul.
I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe if you get deep into the weeds, that's kind of true, but I don't think that the sort of normal teaching is that
I guess
dog or an ant
so not
has a
any
soul.
entity has a soul. So yeah, that's definitely, I don't know. Well, we'll see. But he also discussed the theological implications of discovering alien life at a conference. He took on the topic: would you baptize an extraterrestrial? Yeah. This is something interesting that McCloudtree excerpted. According to Chris Putnam and Tom Horn, authors of Exo Vaticana, Pope Francis I is preparing to lead the Catholic Church to embrace aliens as brothers in Christ, reflective of the 1950s and 1960s contactee reports of benevolent space brothers. Putnam and Horn's Exo Vaticana portends a future religious war between those accepting extraterrestrials as brothers in Christ and those believing them to be returning demons about to enslave us.
Oh God! Is that where Bluebeam's gonna go? It's gonna become a huge human civil war between people that accept the aliens and people that think they're demons.
I don't know. I don't know if that's
ultimate
where
Hegelian dialectic.
Bluebeam is headed. We'll see. Like, I mean, definitely it's already a very contentious issue. Like, some people are of the opinion, like, all aliens are demons. Some people are in the gray area. You know, I think, like, they're Jinn, but do they come from space? Maybe. There's Jinns in space.
Sure.
You know, definitely.
I mean,
There's also probably
see
some
what it
angels in
wouldn't be.
space.
Yeah, we don't.
You know,
Yeah.
but you can't really like, you know, trust these Jinn, especially if
Well,
you're getting a bad
that's
vibe
the
from
thing.
them,
Like,
you
I feel
know?
like it's interesting that he never used. I don't think he talked very much, if at all, about or used the terminology of angels when he was talking about that. Because I would think that if you're talking about these beings, I mean, I guess he wants to avoid these kind of like. You know, Abrahamic concepts of like, you know, angels perhaps in general, but I would say angels generally have like a positive connotation, like a universally more or less positive connotation, as long as they're not fallen angels, you know, where it's like, oh, if you told me I could trust an angel, if I sit down and meditate, an angel UFO will come, then, you know, maybe I wouldn't be as afraid of it. But if you're like, oh, it's just like a visitor. Like, what do you mean a visitor? Or are you talking about a Claxton man? Is it gonna be a Job the Hutt slug god? Like, what is it? A djinn?
Yeah.
Like, what? That doesn't say anything about its intent or its inherent, you know, goodness, or whether or not I should perceive it as a threat.
You never really mentioned angels at all. But I guess, you know, I mean, I definitely have consumed some, like, or, you know, encountered and consumed some, like, evangelical content about, I think it was called, like, Beware of Angels or something, like, you know, talking about how a lot of the time, like, angelic messengers or ascended masters who talk to people, of course, like, you know, they're all demons, and they'll, like, destroy your life, you know, so, I mean, obviously that's, like, a big problem with, like, that's the whole thing with, like, the spiritual communication, like, it's not, like, emergence of it into, like, the mainstream and also, like, the political consciousness in a way. I guess, like, it's something that's been brewing for a while and existed, like, for, you know, a long time. Like, you can see kind of something that just sort of happened in America, like, maybe during the 60s and then, you know, post the flying saucer boom, like, in the 1950s, you know, and then sort of it also happened in the Soviet Union. You know, so but it's, you know, definitely something that you can see happening again with, like, Demi Lovato, like, being, like, happy contact or whatever. You know,
download
she
your
is
CE5 app.
Right, yeah, she's like literally doing Stephen Greer's method, like, to do
with
this,
Stephen Greer, and, you know, Post Malone, probably every, like, satanic sound, like, you know, satanic young rapper, probably believes in UFOs.
Well, it's unknown.
Steven Tyler,
you know,
obviously.
It's unknown, so that's cool. It's unknown.
That's true.
It's unknown. Yeah,
well,
upside down crosses.
Maybe we'll start to, like, wrap up a little bit. The last thing I did want to bring up a little bit, it's not covered in this documentary, but it's something that I think happened since we recorded our first UFO episode, like, over a month ago. And, you know, we've talked about Jinn, we talked about angels, talked about the Vatican. We should probably include the other, you know, third member of the Abrahamic Troika and talk about what came out of Israel recently.
Yes, the Galactic Federation.
Chaim Eshed, who was the head of the IDF Space Security Agency. He's 87 years old, and in December, I guess he published his like memoirs or something, but was giving an interview that parts of which got translated, you know, into English media, where he basically said, let me see here, that aliens are real and U.S. President Donald Trump knows about it. Israel's former space security chief has made an unprecedented claim in an interview, stressing they're keeping their existence a secret as, quote, humanity is not ready for them. Chaim Eshed, 87, in an interview to Israel's Yediot Aharonot newspaper, spoke extensively about extraterrestrial life and also elaborated about, quote, an agreement between the U.S. government and a galactic federation of aliens. Mr. Eshed has headed Israel's space security program for nearly 3 decades. He claims there is an agreement between the U.S. government and the aliens as they wish to research and understand the fabric of the universe. The Jerusalem Post quoted him as saying, citing the original interview published in Hebrew, this cooperation apparently includes a secret underground base on Mars. Kind of interesting. Donald Trump stopped short of revealing their existence because the Galactic Federation insisted humanity is not ready yet.
Short of it, yeah. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
Yeah. The aliens insisted humans need to, quote, evolve and reach a stage where we will understand what space and spaceships are. Interesting. Kind of lends to the interdimensional hypothesis.
It's another dimension, It's the land of Jinn, it's the higher spheres. Yes, okay, correct.
And
points of light,
I guess Ashed said, quote, if I had come up with what I'm saying today 5 years ago, I would have been hospitalized. He has made similar claims in his book, The Universe Beyond the Horizon, Conversations with Professor Haim Ashed. While there's been no reaction from the U.S. government or Donald Trump on this, social media has been flooded ever since the interview. And, I don't know. This got a lot of press. I remember this flying past. I guess, this guy it sounds relatively authoritative, but of course we've seen certain, people like Chris Mellon, who, was like a deputy defense secretary for intelligence or something. It's definitely, or Richard Doty for that example. You can't necessarily trust somebody just because, but this is kind of like, I think, equivalent to, I don't know if it's more equivalent to NASA or equivalent to like Space Force, but he was a retired, he was a 1-star general in Israeli military intelligence. So there's that. And director of space programs for Israel Ministry of Defense for 30 years. Former chair of the Space Committee of the National Council for Research and Development for the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Space, and member of the Steering Committee of Israel Space Agency. He is responsible for the launch of 20 Israeli-made satellites and is widely cited as the father of Israel's space program. So, and he served in the highly secretive...
in those CIA UFO documents, they did have a lot of, material about Israel and UFO sightings over Israel, as they did of, other countries as well. But, obviously it's a geopolitical hotspot, so I don't really know what to make of that. It's very, it's incredibly strange to imagine Trump talking to an alien, and I have trouble believing that happened.
He says that the Galactic Federation stopped Trump. I guess it's the only time somebody's dissuaded Trump from running his mouth about something. I guess we'll find out. We're recording this on the 17th. We'll find out in the next 3 days if he's just gonna do it.
Yeah, exactly. Do it, Trump. You have nothing to lose.
Right.
But it's very. He would not. From what we know about him, unless I feel like they, maybe by stopped, it means that they removed the memories from his mind, and they mind controlled him to not say anything, because, right, they would be able to stop him by just not necessarily just persuading him. They would be able to mind meld with him. That's another thing. Speaking of mind meld,
true.
The use of the terminology Galactic Federation, we need to do an episode down the line, as I think we discussed in the Grotto, about how sus Star Trek is as an influence in popular perceptions of the teleology of human destiny, because is just even the fact that he's calling it a Galactic Federation, which is literally Star Trek terminology. Just watching in the midst of the lockdown, my GF and I have been watching the old Star Trek's over again, and just watching the Stephen Greer documentary, which I subjected her to. She was just constantly rolling her eyes at how everything they said was a Star Trek cliche of some kind. It was always we're gonna be in a federation, something thing like that. We're gonna have, or people talking about the Prime Directive, or what the way that people imagine the way this will be, and just the whole idea that humanity is destined to colonize the stars and become nanite gods who are gonna transcend this sphere is a huge distraction. But you know what, relative to this, this is genuinely what I think. I don't think that there's ever gonna be a moment where like Trump or like Biden or his successor or whomever, like, you know, the president or like the world leaders or the UN or whatever is gonna come forward and be like, meet like, you know, Gleekmork, you know, like the like or whatever. It's always gonna be this like liminal thing, but it's going to be something like Q, where, like, it's easily manipulated by, like, these, like, you know, the military-industrial complex, or, like, the intelligence community, where they can just, like, you know, send little signals out about, like, what the aliens want to, like, manipulate society in certain ways, you know? I mean, I guess I shouldn't rule out that there will one day be, like, a horrible blue beam display in the sky, and, like, Maitreya, like, the false messiah will appear, but, like, something that I definitely think, like, is that, like, it will always be available as, like, a way to, like, you know, manipulate, in the same way that, like, more terrestrial, you know, ideologies or conspiracy theories can be used to, like, manipulate people or shape their perceptions, or the way that, like, the media can be, like, having these little, like, figures who come out and say, like, this is what the light beings told me, you know, like, that will always be, like, in some way, like, in some subliminal way, or in some, like, oblique way, valuable. And, like
going into,
think,
what was the area behind the veil in the temple in Jerusalem back in the day where, you know, allegedly, like, the high priest could go in and have privately talk to Yahweh? I mean, Moses had a tent, right, where he would go in and talk to God, and if anybody else went in the tent, they'd be struck dead by the sight of, you know, Jehovah.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but yeah, I do remember the part with the mountain, I guess maybe because that's, like, you know, in the Quran, but, yeah, the tabernacle, I guess is what you're talking about.
Yeah, the tabernacle, exactly. Yeah, so, I mean, there's always been that kind of thing. It's interesting even to think about, like, Gene Roddenberry circling all back around, because he was part of the 9 group that was supposedly channeling messages from ETs, you know, back in, like, the 60s and 70s, and so a lot of his ideas perhaps were influenced by what he thought were, you know, messages about, like, the glorious space future from, you know, these Nordic 12-foot tall aliens. And then now these people are almost doing, I don't know, they're sort of, they're probably subconsciously influenced by Star Trek culture. Things like those ideas have wormed their way. They've seeped into the groundwater, and maybe they've framed the imaginative limits of kind of how the aliens, you know, what kind of form they would take. Though I feel like there's still
in the same way that there's, like, you know, body snatchers versus, like, close, you know, how, like, they were like, it's disgusting how they put out these movies like Predator to make us think aliens are ugly and not kind, and they'd be like, it's more like Close Encounters, where, you know, like, I'm like the Richard Dreyfuss character, you know, or whatever, like, it's like so, like, you know,
I'm like the he did say I'm like the Richard Dreyfuss.
Yeah, he literally did. Yeah, it is interesting how one thing that was interesting that they sort of brought out in the documentary was Trump, like, constantly saying, like, we must have dominance in space, you know, like, we need to have, like, the idea of, like, I think that space is, like, an interesting sort of, like, conceptual terrain that, like, you know, people want to have, like, a type of mastery over that has, like, a certain imaginative power, and I think that the whole thing with, like, aliens is part of that. Like, it hasn't, you know, we haven't seen that or really QAnon be, like, fully activated. And maybe, like, you know, we're always waiting for this climactic moment. There's always, like, this sort of, you know, delayed satisfaction maybe with it that will always exist. But I do feel like you could easily, like, activate, like, because, like, these forces have, like, you know, we talked about this in our past UFO episode, how originally this whole subculture was, like, kind of arrayed against the government and against, like, these sources of authority that, you know, even in the people who are, like, against the cabal, you know, similar to, like, you know, similar to the Q stuff, where they're against the cabal, but they're still, like, the patriots, they're still the military, they're still, like, this, you know, General Flynn or whatever. So it's just, like, those are the people who now control all of this. Those are the people who are now the authorities in the world of, like, ufology. Like, they have the power to, like, control what the consensus is about, like, you know, or what the lack of consensus is, you know, about what these beings want, to control the argument about, like, to frame the argument about like the aliens, you know, which I think is a form of power, you know, that's separate from the actual phenomenon. And I think that you know, the phenomenon, and I think that is like an interesting wrinkle in all of this, like the you know, that's like where the blue beam is already manifesting. You know,
it just it makes me think of the Wizard of Oz, actually. You know, I mean, isn't the Wizard of Oz kind of like a blue beamy type allegory of a story?
Well,
like, look at this wizard, you know, it's just a man. Yeah, exactly. And of course, you know, that's like, but that was made by like a theosophist living in like the biggest naval installation, as Dave McGowan loved to remind us, in like the United States, in San Diego, and is like a cultist or like absolutely obsessed with like being inspired by the Wizard of Oz.
I mean, you can see how like the themes like are this. I mean, and Peter Pan as well, like is something that, I mean, that's 19th century, but you can see how the themes of like UFO lore and like Close Encounters and Peter Pan like have like clear. Is there even like Peter Pan analogies directly made in Close Encounters? I don't remember.
You know what? I've actually never seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Wow.
I know. I probably should watch
that's why
it.
you're not involved enough, because that's why the light beings haven't contacted you, because you haven't seen this awesome movie that was made at Lookout Mountain or whatever, you know, like but you know, by Spielberg.
Was it made at no, he was just living up
like
there.
he was just trained there. He got his,
but you know what though,
orders.
like
that's where he got his orders.
Yeah, exactly. You know, Wizard of Oz, though, and Peter Pan are both, in a way, kind of like interdimensional stories.
Yeah, they are. They're the same, like, plot line. I mean, especially with Peter Pan, like, he comes in through the window at night, you know, he takes these kids away to the stars. Second star of the right star until morning, you know, like, to, like, you know, a land where, and, like, that's kind of something that Jacques Vallée and John Keel like would often point out, would be that, you know, a lot of these like encounters that people had, like now oftentimes like your standard UFO encounter, the ones that sort of, it's weird because the like if they're even talked about at all, like the abduction stuff or the actual like substance of the encounters and what the entities look like which both the phenomenon and you know, the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind documentary, to keep, you know, going with the you know, comparison between the two, both of them kind of don't really get into the substance of like the beings themselves, you know, despite Stephen Greer being like, what's really interesting is these entities, you know, like again, like, so I guess your documentary is interesting because you don't really talk about them, but like like,
or what they want, you know, what they said to you, anything like that.
But you know, like most of the time when they do kind of, or like, you know, when Stephen Greer said that this like little fetus is an alien, you know, like it's kind of looks like you're gray, you know, that's what you're meant to believe, like this very X-Files like standard thing where the aliens look at this particular thing all the time, but really, like, you know, so the official sort of UFO narrative, the most popular one that I think that people are sort of drawn to, maybe like for whatever reason, maybe have been conditioned to you know, be more drawn to, like it has that certain feature, but a lot of them are very, very bizarre and include like beings that don't really make like sense, or humanoid beings, or like, you know, talking like, you know, Coke bottles or whatever, you know, like like weird stuff, like, you know, like the airship stuff in the 19th century, you know, like that we read, the type stuff, you know, so like, yeah, like in a 19th century language, or in Wizard of Oz, you know, that is like she gets carried away into the air by like a tractor beam, you know, a vortex or whatever.
A vortex, yeah, like a synthetic hurricane.
And she, exactly. And you know, what does she discover? That like you know, she had the power all along, right? You know,
I guess
she was the real alien. She was the reptoid, right? But
you know, I guess she red pilled or like red healed all of Oz by exposing their own cabal. Right?
Yeah, she did.
She exposed the man behind the curtain.
It was well, he was from Earth, He was from Kansas himself, right? Yeah, at least in the movie. I haven't read the book since I was in middle school, and I probably never will again. But
sure. So that even lends more
maybe we should do a
credence
Wizard of Oz, Wizard of Oz episode.
I think we should.
I remember there's like some weird stuff in the book, like that you would like the Winkies or whatever, or like the Hammerheads that are like these bizarre entities that like blast their heads at you. Like there's some messed up stuff in the book.
It's like a scary Mario world kind of thing.
And her slippers are silver in the book, or crystal or something. They're not red. They're ruby in the movie because that was more spectacular in the Technicolor.
For Technicolor, exactly. We also might want to talk about Return to Oz, which I remember watching many years ago, which is extremely bizarre.
Yeah, with the heads, very scary, very scary, disturbing.
Very creepy movie. Yeah.
And right. And the original characters aren't really in it. Like, she has a new group of friends, but then at the end they show up and they don't look like you remember, and it's very upsetting. Like, they're like the Cowardly Lion is like this horrible, like, plush line. It's really horrible. But anyway, so the themes of this are something that like are, of course, you can talk about like the fairy lore and stuff like that, or all these different encounters, like
the witches,
go back to, like, and medieval time, the witches' night flight and things like that. We kind of went into this in our. And I think we should
Chimeras,
do some more, like,
flying monkeys. They got flying monkeys,
folks. Folks. Yeah, exactly. These monkeys are flying. They're flying. The witch has them locked up, and they have to do it. They don't want to.
Like a mentally unstable man-lion hybrid.
He's from Nightmare Hall. The opium poppies, make you fall asleep. There's a lot of stuff like that, I think, like that is sort of like shows like the sort of imaginative power of this stuff, and it's interesting how like now the control over it has been like so consolidated, and I think I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I feel like we should mention AOC and her use of the close encounter terminology. That jumped out at me.
Me too. Me too.
I definitely had like a moment of like, because I saw it like in a tweet. And, just reading it at first, it was like AOC, like, revealed she had a close encounter, and I was like, what? Like, literally it said that, like, and it's like, who says close encounter except, like, in a UFO context? In fact, I think that in the CIA UFO documents that I was reading through, there were also some, in the same way that, like, stuff just called, like, that mentioned the word phenomenon, like, ended up in there. Yeah. Like, if you use the phrase close encounter, whether you were referring to UFOs or not, which I guess some people do, which I never knew before.
Yeah,
there's some things that, like, close encounter with, modernization or whatever that, like, are, but yeah, like, so, I mean, I guess
it's like it doesn't seem
used it.
It doesn't seem relevant to anything except coming across a thing that you would normally never come across, and like, it's like something fleeting and rare, like a close encounter. Well, like you don't have a close encounter with modernization. That's like a process. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, and like especially in the context of like, like I feel like maybe AOC had like a close call. Or like,
I think it would. Yeah, you'd say close call, but then maybe those things got switched. But it also, I don't know, it like evokes this kind of thing,
like a close encounter with like a MAGA person, like
like almost alienizing
of the MAGA kind. Yeah.
Is this a sort of strange like a rhetorical alienification?
Especially because of the movie, people like know the people know the movie whether they've seen it or not. They're familiar with the movie, and like that's the main association is with aliens, close encounters of the X kind, it's weird.
It's weird, and I mean, it even I was saying before, like there's even a weird parallel between like the sort of like Tom DeLonge, Stephen Greer, like internecine ufologist beef, and like it even feels a little bit like AOC and Jimmy Dore like fighting each other.
Yeah,
it's like I don't trust either of you.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
That's
neither. Yeah, and I think that both like it's that same pincer move that is like plays out like in American politics and in all of these like topics, like where people get like wedged between two like superficially different alternatives that like ultimately are like part of this one like dialectic. Yeah, that I think will be like, I don't know. We'll see what the future holds. I think we'll see this topic continue to like come to the fore, and I think that we'll see like the spiritual component around it. My feeling is that we'll see the spiritual component around it continue to develop. You know, and be championed by the Demi Lovatos of the world.
Yeah, this is going to become kind of like I think it might be in the same way that, I don't know if like astrology ever really went away, but I feel like over the last like 5 years or so, it's had a real like internet resurgence in culture. And it just, there's more platforms for it, and there's more ways of like kind of like, you know, incorporating it into people's lives and stuff. You know, there's apps, there's like Co-Star now, and things like that, and things that kind of fill the void in an otherwise like kind of atomized like lowercase m materialistic like de-religiousized society that we have. But I think now, but I think it also speaks to a yearning for some kind of a spiritual cosmology or something. You know, that it's not enough just to have like the facts, you know, or something like that. And I think now maybe UFOs, you know, are going to come back on the upswing. You know, maybe I think Trump kind of crowded a lot of the space in people's heads for some of that stuff. That fucking toxic Gemini just fucking distracted everybody for 4 years. Of course he's a Gemini. Come on.
Oh, wow.
Wow,
Donald Trump is a Gemini. Damn. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. See, it makes sense. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
two-faced. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a Gemini moon, so watch your mouth a little bit. But you know, we're not all Geminis. But one day we will do a sus astrology.
Just like ETs, you know, Geminis, just like ETs face xenophobia and like, you know, the treatment as being, we found some article on like Syracuse like news or whatever from their like UFO correspondent talking about the problem of xenophobia against ET beings, and how, you know, we treat them like demons, and that's a form of xenophobia. Geminis also definitely face serious discrimination, you know, and
that's really true.
It's not cool. I looked up that book, by the way, Exo Vaticana, that was mentioned on the McLeod Tree blog. It's the subtitle is it's called Exo Vaticana, Petrus Romanus, Project LUCIFER, and the Vatican's astonishing plan for the arrival of an alien savior.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So I mean, what are we to believe that like basically like the Soviets like infiltrated the entire Catholic Church and like Phaeton pilled them, and now I don't know. Like what do they think is going to happen? Is the Vatican...
This book may shatter the comfort of closely held presuppositions and may result in the wholesale alteration of crucial priorities. Word.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what I like to see sometimes.
A new instrument with an evil-sounding name is helping scientists see how stars are born. Lucifer, which stands for Large Binocular Telescope Near-Infrared Utility with Camera and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactic Research, is a chilled instrument attached to a telescope in Arizona.
You know what? I have heard of this. And that is a Jesuit laboratory. It's run by the Jesuits, I believe.
Stop.
Yeah.
Why?
I know that is sus. That is definitely sus.
That's
I don't know
sus.
what. Yeah.
No.
See, there's a little bit of like weird like insight role, like loving Lucifer, like Gnostic things going on. At least in a cheeky level of naming things like things like that. Yeah, you know, just got to be a little careful with the Jesuits because, you know, sometimes they get a little too worldly, I guess. That's really their problem because they're really the scientific, like, intelligentsia of the Catholic Church nowadays, which is another reason why people would have resented them, is because they are the one, you know, they're kind of like Father Karras in The Exorcist. I think he was a Jesuit, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. He was a Jesuit.
Yeah, he was a Jesuit. So that's like a very prototypical kind of like modern Jesuit, as a guy who's like got a PhD in like psychology, but then he also they're seen as something having more aloof, like intellectualized kind of connection to their faith than maybe other Catholics, and so they're maybe more susceptible to the seductions of scientism and sorcery of that kind, but
yes.
we really don't know. We really don't know.
This guy actually, I guess, is a friend of L.A. Mazzulli, the author of this book, or the authors of this book, and they're referring his Nephilim. They're referring to his Nephilim research heavily in charting out their argument here. They're drawing heavily on some of his. While we're not exactly sure what to make all of this, the parallel formations. He's talking about the Nephilim here.
Beautiful.
Yes. A lot of stuff here. The cover of that book, which I guess is by L.A. Marzulli, features a fleet of flying saucers over Jerusalem. Yeah, I wonder if the head of Israel's space service will be willing to cede Jerusalem, since all this stuff is just a bunch of silly nonsense, and the ETs will tell us like the real truth. Like, can we just please have Jerusalem? Like, it's not
good question. Good question. Yeah, how are these things going to get sorted out? I would love to know.
They can do it to the barbarians who aren't, sophisticated. I don't see why we should quibble over these earthly things when
we just need to do TM out in the desert. And give Stephen Greer $3,000 to go hang out with light beings with him and summon orbs of their minds.
Yeah, I wonder if they take drugs, like, because what?
No, he said they don't. He said they strictly, which is very similar to TM and like a lot of yoga cults and like new agey yoga cults. They are very not. He believes that taking psychedelic drugs or any substances interferes with the just like your brain
I wonder
waves,
if anyone has ever, because I feel like
concentration.
it's much easier to make people certain that they've had an encounter with a being with the aid of psychedelics, as we know from like Charles Manson and things like that. So
I
wonder if anyone's ever disappointed. But I guess like once you have the buy-in of, I guess $3,000 is also a powerful incentive. Like if you paid that much money, like whether you see a being or not. Not to say that necessarily they don't encounter some like pernicious jinn on these expeditions, but
or just the local military base sending up some of its like new experimental drones to be like, whoa, like Stephen Greer just like tells them where they're gonna be every time they go out. They just send out, because he does go to places that are basically like huge hubs of like military and Air Force activity. Like in Joshua Tree is right near 29 Palms, huge military base. In the Mojave Desert, places in Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, etc. Like Las Vegas is still the #1 UFO sighting city in like the world. Is that completely a coincidence, given the presence of like Nellis Air Force Base and Area 51?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Course.
I mean, I think that's the reason for that memo that we talked about in our earlier UFO episode, where that guy was like, we need to establish complete air dominance and control and monitor everything in order to know like what is us and what is like possibly like a real unidentified object.
Yeah. And then we can use it to psyop, and it would involve psyoping everybody, but that's fine.
Yeah, according to this guy, which I guess McLeod Tree is like, reading, just to get the scoop on the latest Vatican activities. There will be, the Vatican is planning a blue beam basically to create a new alien savior. I guess the title kind of gave that away, but
well, God, actual God help us then.
Yeah, actual God definitely help us.
Not fake God. Not deep fake God.
Us. Yeah, not deep fake God, not any,
All right, cool.
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
All right, we can stop.
We're in a good time here, so we can wrap up. We'll circle back. We just want to. I think it's good we kept this in the mix because it keeps popping up in the news, and I feel like they're cooking up some funky business. with this in terms of mainstreaming it, and we're gonna keep an eye on it.
Yeah, we definitely will keep an eye on it. Yeah, there will be future Close Encounters. Yeah, we definitely should do an episode about, like, you know, deeper into the kind of Mothman, John Keel type material. I think that would be good.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I actually don't know too much about Mothman. I don't know if he's a chimera or interdimensional, but I'm curious to learn.
Yeah, he's an ultra-terrestrial.
Okay.
You know, he's a djinn like everything, but, you know,
Gotcha.
He's a particularly mothy one. I guess. Yeah.
Terrifying. Okay. Well,
yeah.
Well, that's it. That's it for now. You know, I guess don't pay $3,000 to Stephen Greer. Just download the $10 app, but actually don't, because you're going to be talking with Jin.
Yeah, don't do transcendental meditation in the desert with, like, some sus dude. Yeah, that was another. I mean. Yo, before we stop, like, that was another great part of the documentary where he was talking about, like, how, you know, some guy, I guess it was the guy who wrote The Day After Roswell, who was, like, a young, brash colonel, who, like, this was the end of the documentary, where it's, like, one day he came face-to-face with an E.T., and the E.T. told him to shut down, like, all the, you know, missiles or whatever, and, or to take, turn off the, you know, radio sort of monitoring that was recording their conversation or something, and the colonel said, like, "What's in it for me?" And the E.T. responded, you know, "A new world, if you can take it." And it's like, what? Like,
that's
for one,
literally
like,
how it ends, right? That's like the end of the documentary, and that was very sus. Like, what do you mean a new world? That sounds like he's gonna offer you an evil deal to, like, take over the world.
Also, I feel like it's just like, true. New World,
New World
anything
Order,
involving a new world, like, give me a break. But,
if
like,
you can take
also, it was, like, exactly, like, the cadence and the formula of that thing that, like,
Benjamin Franklin said.
MAGA people love. Yeah, exactly. Like,
a republic, if you can keep it, sir. Yeah,
exactly. Like, you know, like the Glenn Beck, like, favorite quote of all time. Like, literally, it was like fucking, like, psyoping, like, you know, any, like, curious, like, QAnoners who were listening to be like, this is patriotic. Like, you know, this something, I like something about this. I can't put my finger on it, but something about this makes me feel good. Like, it sounds like my favorite fucking quote ever, where the Republic...
Most profound thing ever.
Yeah.
But it's way more sinister than Ben Franklin. It's like a new world if you can take it.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe
he's saying that to U.S. military. Not my comrade. Fuck off, E.T. Stop making deals with Air Force officers.
I mean, honestly, the ET is like, what is their problem? Why are they just being like, we can turn off your missiles, just turn them off. Like, turn them off.
Tell everybody they've been turned off.
Turn them off.
What are we gonna do? We can't blow ourselves up if you turn them off. So, like, what are we gonna?
As we know, it's game, set, match. You know, like, no contest. Like, absolute, you know, domination by the ETs. So, like, why don't they just, like, I mean, you know, it doesn't make any sense that they haven't revealed themselves if they want to be contacted. Like, because we aren't giving Stephen Greer enough money, that's why. That's the only reason why they, like, you know, if we just give him more money, then, like, we'll
hit that 1% target that Maharishi laid down so many years ago,
exactly.
and then we'll finally, and maybe if the Scientologists join in, along with the World Anti-Communist League, the Western Goals Foundation, the Contras, the Vatican Bank, and Bolivian drug manufacturers, and Nazi death squad in South America under the coordination of Daniel Sheehan, then maybe, just maybe, we can hit that mark. And
just maybe, but not any of these people like Tom DeLonge who are exactly the same as us, because, like, they're compromised. You know?
They are exactly the same. They're exactly the fucking same.
We're literally mirror images of each other, and it's like, well, you know, like, you're not invited to the ETs. Like, you know, like, fuck
Stephen
off.
Greer said on a podcast I listened to that Tom DeLonge, like, I used to mentor him when he was in Blink-182. Unfortunately, you know, he got taken by the cabal. You know, they totally roped him in. You know, so he submitted to the cabal. Can't trust him anymore. It's a real shame. You hate to see it.
You said that he got pissed off on that podcast, right? Like the questions, like
yeah, it was on the higher side chats from kind of the middle of last year, and he got very very upset at Greg Carlwood for questioning like, why is the threshold 1%? Like, don't you think that like that's not enough people to like, what do you think actually going to happen? And just asked him like, don't you think you're putting the cart before the horse? Of if the aliens aren't coming before. Until we solve all our internal problems and like evolve, then why would reaching out to them directly right now be of any use? Because like they're not going to come because we still haven't dealt with our corrupt cabal that is like running the world and psyoping everybody. And he goes, no, it's not putting the cart before the horse. Like, you don't understand. And then at some point later he was like, well, you just been so hostile and negative this entire interview. And he's like, no, I haven't. He's like, yeah, every single question you ask me is trying to like beat me down and say this isn't true and all that stuff. He was trying to be nice to Stephen Greer, but Stephen Greer definitely had a little bit that LaRouche swagger of
very ascended, very very chilled out, very advanced of being.
He just couldn't get on his level. Yeah, Greg Harwood couldn't get on his level. Unfortunately, he said,
"Few can, yeah."
Yeah, you hate to see it, but
yeah, you do.
I guess he probably won't come on our podcast now if he ever listens to this.
I would not really want to have him on the podcast, to be honest.
Yeah, he's not.
I feel like it would just be annoying because, like, yeah, I mean, he would like storm off the podcast if we asked him like anything honest. Like,
yeah,
just have
that's
to fucking
true.
fawn over his like bullshit that he's just been repeating forever. Like, why would? I don't know if anyone would want to listen to that episode. Like, I mean,
I'm gonna lay it out right now.
In general, but yeah, like
I think Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, who we love and respect so much. If we get them on, probably shouldn't talk about openly how it'd be like setting them into a trap to expose like their like CIA tie. I mean, they're pretty open about their CIA ties, but really, I don't know. Try to find some way for them to like pin them down on all this remote viewing shit, because they went through another whole round of like bold claims in this documentary, or Russell Teague does, that basically, yeah, it totally all works. Like, it's totally real. He even brags that, like, I guess you could say the CIA, subsidized all my psychic research for 30 years. Ha ha ha. I think you just think that's a long, strange trip, man. But
I just thought of a grift where, like, the founding fathers, like, ascended and became ETs. And, like, that's, like, the highest level of patriotism, and that's, like, why that ET sounded so much like Ben Franklin, because, like, it was Ben Franklin, and, like, he was, like, just repeating his eternal, command to the American people of, like, rise to our level, like, you've kept the Republic, now join us, like, in eternity, like...
in the pantheon of patriots.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
Right,
get to work.
Yeah. I guess that's out there. That's free for any of you guys to use. If you wanna start making a career of weird Q grift involved.
Unlike CE5 and TM, it is not TM'd, trademarked, literally. So go ahead. It's a open source. Trust it, like Signal.
Yeah, it would be annoying if that like became a thing that we then had to have an episode about. I was like, sorry everyone, like I accidentally created the new, like
Saint Benjamin, Saint George.
Yeah. The real ascended masters, the ascended founders, the ascended patriots. There's something to this, like it's like a more like nationalistic version of like ascended master beliefs, like
if the self-realization fellowship wants a rejuvenation, that idea that
I think I might need to copyright this, like someone copyrighted the Ouija board like format. I think I might need to like get this down, like get into a patent office like right away. I need to build some kind of like patriot like communicator device and get a patent on it right away.
Sounds smart. All right. Well,
yeah. All right.
That's for now. To beware the blue beam. It's everywhere. And until next time, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Now, settle more deeply into this ocean of quiet awareness, where all perceptions are like distant ripples on the surface of the ocean. Perceive that this vast awake mind extends infinitely in all directions. And you see that this awakeness is omnipresent. It is not bound by space or time. And so it is infinite, and it is eternal. This is the true nature of the awakeness whereby we perceive our own breath, our own self, sight, sounds, thoughts. We feel the joy and peace of knowing that this awake being, this mind, is ever present within us. Now, releasing ourselves from all attachment to perception or even self, we see the unbounded quality of this awakeness as universal. And every person in this circle is awake. And while we are unique individuals, the light of awareness is a singularity. And that awakeness is one. And we are being one in many bodies. One light illuminating every soul and conscious mind. We see this same vast awakeness permeating the earth beneath us and expanding into the sky above us. Omnipresent, it is awake in all places. And soaring on the wings of this vast and limitless awareness, we expand upwards into the sky, and we see that the entire earth is shining in the light of this awakeness. And beyond us, space, and the planets of our solar system, all spinning, swimming in an ocean of awake cosmic mind.